Chapter 9:15. Many experts. It can't be. I've deliberately found the most secluded place for my teacher's residence. When I enter and exit the Black Blood Forest, I also take a detour and don't dare to reveal any traces. Why are there so many people? Wei Wuyan said in surprise. There are many experts. 7 or 8 of them are not below you, and 3 or 4 of them are far above you. Zi Xiecheng frowned as she listened. She said lightly, and their murderous intents are very strong. Strong murderous intents. Wei Wuyan's face changed. Not good. Could it be? Could it be that they've chased after us? The law enforcement interrogation hall. Chu Yang asked. Yes. Wei Wuyan was very anxious. He was about to rush over. Wait. Chu Yang said calmly. Brother Wei, let's make a good plan first. You can also tell us the cause and effect of this matter, so that we can have a good idea. Wei Wuyan said. Okay, let's talk as we walk. Chu Yang nodded silently and sped up. The law enforcement interrogation hall was the most powerful hall in the law enforcement circle. Apart from the elders and the elders, there were as many experts as there were clouds inside. My teacher's name is Hong Wuliang, and he has the honorific title of Supreme Icy Snow. 1,000 years ago, he was also an all-powerful figure. And the law enforcement master of the interrogation hall is called Lang Yilang, and he has the nickname of Raging Waves. This person is actually from the same hometown as my teacher. Back then, the two of them had a very good relationship. When they were young, they had once roamed the martial world together. Wei Wuyan explained the ins and outs of the matter as they hurried on. Later on, my teacher and Lang Yilang met a girl who was being chased by bandits at the same time. The two of them acted together and saved the girl. The girl was very beautiful, and my teacher and Lang Yilang took a fancy to her at the same time. Needless to say, the two of them had turned against each other because of this girl. Chu Yang looked up and sighed. Femme fatale. Femme fatale. As he said, he couldn't help but glance at Zi Xiecheng. He empathized with Wei Wuyan's teacher. Zi Xiecheng was expressionless. She glanced at him and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear. After settling the matter of Wei Wuyan's master, you need to improve your cultivation. Chu Yang was on the verge of tears. He wished he could slap his own mouth a few times. I told you not to talk nonsense. Don't talk nonsense. You fucking talked nonsense again. A woman can't marry 2 husbands. In the end, that woman still chose my master and became my master's wife. As Wei Wuyan ran, his words were still clear and logical. Lang Yilang left heartbroken. If that's all, then it's nothing much. Although Lang Yilang was sad, he didn't do anything despicable. Wei Wuyan let out a wry laugh. I hate Lang Yilang to the core, but when it comes to this matter, I'm not willing to deliberately smear his name. Although Lang Yilang is a little biased, he's still considered a sexual lover. Chu Yang nodded. Understood. After a few decades, my master's wife suddenly contracted a strange illness. It was a terminal illness of the bloodline. My master sought treatment from many places, but in the end, she couldn't be saved and died in my master's arms. Wei Wuyan's voice became low and deep. At that time, Lang Yilang was already a low-level law enforcement officer. When he received the news, he rushed over from afar to offer his condolences. In the morning hall, he was emotional and heartbroken. He vomited blood and fainted on the spot. After he woke up, he fell out with my master and blamed him for not taking good care of the person he loved. My master tried to explain, but he just wouldn't listen. Everyone's persuasion was useless. He cut ties with my master on the spot and fought with him. Everyone was there at that time. Lang Yilang didn't succeed, and was injured by one of my master's brothers. Before he left, he cut off his finger and swore to the heavens that he would fight my master to the death for the rest of his life. He swore that he would make my master suffer the cruelest torture in the world until he died. When Wei Wuyan said this, both Chu Yang and Zi Xiecheng sighed deeply. The two of them really didn't have much to say about such matters. This Lang Yilang could be considered a sentimental person. When the person he loved didn't choose him, he left heartbroken. When he returned, she was already gone. After several decades, he was actually still heartbroken and vomited blood and fainted on the spot. This showed how deep his love was. He had never married in his entire life. This also showed that he had used up all the feelings he had in his life to fall in love with her back then. It was just that even though his infatuation was pitiable, his actions were detestable. No matter what, that woman was already married and was someone else's wife. Moreover, she had died because of an incurable disease, and not because she had been abused by her husband's family. It was very wrong of Lang Yilong to make such a fuss. That Hong Wuliang was really tragic enough. He was already heartbroken over the death of his beloved wife. Yet an old rival in love popped up to denounce him, and he even got into a fight in the morning hall. It really wasn't easy for him to hold himself back. Chu Yang thought to himself, actually there's only one thing to say. Regardless of whether she's the person you love, she's still my wife. What right do you have to ask me about this? What status do you have to ask me about this? But that Hong Wuliang probably didn't have the guts to say this, right? After losing his beloved wife, my master devoted himself to martial arts and reached the martial saint level within a few hundred years. Lang Yilong, on the other hand, was determined to take revenge, and his cultivation also improved by leaps and bounds. Wei Wuyan said, whenever the two of them met, it would be a battle of life and death. My master's cultivation was higher than Lang Yilong's, so he showed mercy every time and didn't kill him. But not only did Lang Yilong not appreciate my master's painstaking efforts, he even became more and more aggressive. He actually remembered all the people who had fought with him, among those who went to offer their condolences back then. In the future, he used all kinds of means to take revenge, either by framing others or making use of his rights as a law enforcement officer to arrest them one by one and persecute them to death. That's not right at all, Chu Yang and Zi Xieching said at the same time. Even if there's a grudge between them, even if he's sad and indignant, there's no need to lay his hands on innocent people. That's right, Wei Wuyan said. It's also precisely because of this that my master and Lang Yilong truly became mortal enemies. So much so that my master even took the initiative to travel all over the world, to look for Lang Yilong and seek justice for his dead brothers. But Lang Yilong disappeared without a trace from then on, and disappeared from this world. When he reappeared several hundred years later, Lang Yilong had already become a warden of the law enforcement interrogation hall. The two of them fought several battles. Lang Yilong had many henchmen, and my master was no match for him, so he could only look for opportunities. Several hundred years passed again, and my master became a supreme martial artist. Then, he wanted to look for Lang Yilong to settle scores. But at that time, Lang Yilong took the initiative to issue a challenge, and invited my master to a fair battle. When Wei Wuyan reached this point, Chu Yang and Zi Xieching already understood everything. They couldn't help but sigh deeply in their hearts. Just because of the affection back then, the two of them were entangled with each other for their entire lives. Although it could be said that they became two supreme martial artists because of this, the two of them still fought to the death over this matter, even after they became supreme martial artists. It could be seen that the affection back then was deeply engraved in their hearts. My master went alone. The two of them had a drink first as a parting of life and death. Then, the two of them had a great battle on the mountain. But at the critical moment, when my master and Lang Yilong exchanged injuries, each of them struck the other with a palm. It was only then that my master realized that Lang Yilong's arm had turned into the color of an entire purple crystal jade core. What he was using at this moment was actually the purple crystal hand. The purple crystal hand can cause one to go bankrupt, Wei Wuyan said. My master's mind was in a mess and he wanted to escape. But Lang Yilong pursued him all the way. He didn't hesitate to exchange injuries for injuries, and struck my master 3 more times. My master fled back with serious injuries, and immediately took me to a place to live in seclusion. Only a few days later, the place where we originally lived was already reduced to ashes. All these years, the illness of my master's purple crystal hand became more and more serious. Since 100 years ago, his purple crystals had already been depleted. I roamed the martial world alone, desperately earning purple crystals to extend my master's life. Until today. When Wei Wuyan finished, he heaved a long sigh. With the purple crystal hand, one's path could never be cut off. If the supply of purple crystals was cut off one day, from the next day onwards, the number of purple crystals needed would double, and so on and so forth. All these years, for the sake of his master's injuries, this Wuxian expert who had never begged anyone in his life had really been driven to a corner. Ordinary people could still rest and recuperate after completing a mission and find other ways to enjoy and relax. But no matter how difficult a mission Wei Wuxian had completed, the next one was already in his hands. He didn't dare to stop for even a moment. He was afraid that one day his master's purple crystals would be cut off, and he wouldn't be able to continue anymore. It's indeed not easy, Zi Xiecheng chuckled. Then her face turned cold. Her slender eyebrows furrowed slightly, revealing boundless murderous intent. But this matter really deserves to be killed. Both of them deserve to be killed. Wei Wuxian was stunned. Even Chu Yang was a little puzzled. Lang Yilong deserves to be killed. It's one thing for him to like a woman, but this woman is already married. Even if he can't let go of her, he should at least hide it in his heart. To make a scene in the morning hall of another person's wife, saying that the other person didn't take good care of his beloved, it's simply laughable and despicable. Just this alone is enough to warrant the death penalty, because he caused a dead person's reputation to be tarnished because of him. Not to mention that he did so many other wrong things after that. Even death can't wipe out his crimes. Zi Xiecheng said coldly and sternly. Perhaps you men will think that this is a kind of deep affection that is worthy of praise. But let me tell you, in a woman's heart, this kind of infatuation is even more unbearable than that of an enemy who has committed heinous crimes. Because this kind of deep affection will destroy her peaceful and happy life at any time. And what is the most important thing for a woman? Once she is married, the most important things are her family, husband and children. Lang Yilong's deep affection can easily take away all these from a woman's life. No matter how loyal a woman is, as long as her husband has the slightest bit of suspicion, then there will never be a day of peace, and it will all end in tragedy. To be deeply in love with a woman whom you like, and who also likes you is a virtue. But to be deeply in love with a woman whom you like, but who doesn't like you is torture and destruction. This kind of man deserves to be killed even more than a perverted thief. The murderous intent in Zi Xiecheng's eyes was overwhelming. Chapter 916. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Chu Yang and Wei Wuxian were stunned at the same time. Net of nets, indeed. The two of them considered the problem from a man's point of view. They indeed felt that although Lang Yilong had committed heinous crimes, he was deeply affectionate and well-intentioned. He was really a pitiful person in love. Indeed, a hateful person would definitely have a pitiful side. However, they didn't expect that coming from a woman's mouth, it would become a heinous crime. Chu Yang thought deeply for a while and finally said, "That's right. This is very reasonable." He let out a long sigh and said, "When we men talk about love, we usually stand on the man's side. Sometimes, it's inevitable that we'll be one-sided. Love is always two-sided. If we don't care about the woman's feelings, I believe that we won't be a good husband." When he said this, Chu Yang was thinking about Mo Qinggu. He thought, what is Qinggu like? If Qinggu becomes my wife, then what should I do? Wei Wuxian nodded. At first, Zi Xiecheng's words seemed a little extreme. However, after thinking about it carefully, he knew that what she said actually made a lot of sense. For a woman, a man's deep and unforgettable love for a woman was undoubtedly the highest affirmation of herself. Therefore, before marriage, a woman would really enjoy such deep feelings. However, after the other party married someone else, if such deep feelings still existed, it would become a nightmare that the woman couldn't get rid of. She would be constantly on tenterhooks about whether the other party would suddenly appear in front of her and her husband. Since a woman had decided to marry a man, she had already decided where she would belong for the rest of her life. Therefore, she would care a lot about her marriage and her life. If someone wanted to destroy her marriage, in her heart, no matter how good this person had been to her in the past, at this moment, he would be an abominable enemy. Because as long as it was a woman, she would know that a husband's suspicion could easily destroy a marriage that could have lasted forever. Net of nets, just as men knew that a woman's jealousy was unreasonable, Similarly, a man's suspicion was also absolutely unreasonable. A woman's jealousy could be resolved, but once a man's suspicion arose, there would never be a time when it would disappear. Until the death of the marriage. A man could endure the humiliation of being groomed, but he would never endure being cuckolded. Therefore, if you love a woman and she already has a home, then it's best not to date her with the idea of not being lovers, but being friends, because she's no longer alone. Beside her, there is always a pair of eyes, watching her and you vigilantly, even if he was full of smiles. But sometimes, a careless look or action from you can bring endless grievances and mental pain to the person you love. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. If your wife and her ex-lover were to chat and laugh together, you wouldn't feel comfortable either. So if you truly love me, please let me go. After that, her emotions and sorrows will have nothing to do with you. It might seem cold and emotionless, but it was the highest level of love. Lang Yilong should be killed. However, Hong Wuliang deserves to be killed even more. Zi Xiecheng said coldly. He clearly knew that Lang Yilong was such a person, yet he showed mercy and didn't kill him. It was only when Lang Yilong killed all of his friends and brothers that he started to take action. A man like him doesn't deserve to be called a man. Firstly, in front of his wife's coffin, he actually allowed Lang Yilong to claim that his wife was Lang Yilong's most beloved person. This is equivalent to allowing him to slander his wife's reputation. And he even explained it to him. That's one sin. Secondly, when Lang Yilong challenged him to a duel, he was indirectly slandering his deceased wife for the second time. Yet he still let him go. That's two sins. Thirdly, his friends died because of him. He was the one who caused the deaths of his friends and brothers, and not Lang Yilong. That's three sins. Fourthly, for so many years, he enjoyed his disciples' offerings with a clear conscience, completely ignoring the fact that his purple crystal hand had already destroyed his disciples' life. His selfishness is so infuriating. That's 4 sins. The combined punishment of 4 sins is a capital offense that deserves to be hacked into pieces. Zi Xiecheng said coldly. A man like this is unfaithful to his wife, unfaithful to his friends, and unloving to his brothers. He's overcautious and indecisive. Living is disgusting. He might as well die early and reincarnate earlier, so that fewer people will die because of him. Wei Wuyan was furious. How dare you say that about my master? Zi Xiecheng said dispassionately. Your master? The moment I see him, I'll kill him with my own hands. Your master? Marrying your master's wife is actually not as blissful as marrying Lang Yilong back then, because Lang Yilong took the initiative to bear everything for her, while your master was passive. Although Lang Yilong isn't a good person, he more or less has some sense of responsibility as a man. As for your master, he's no longer worthy of being called a man. Wei Wuyan said coldly. Since that's the case, I won't trouble you anymore. He turned and hurried away. He had originally wanted to make use of Zi Xiecheng's terrifying cultivation to kill the enemy. However, Zi Xiecheng's words had crossed Wei Wuyan's bottom line. From the perspective of a bystander, how could Wei Wuyan not know that although Zi Xiecheng's words were extreme, they were indeed the truth? Moreover, his master's indecisiveness had persisted for his entire life. But facts were facts. He couldn't admit it, because the person Zi Xiecheng was scolding was his master, the person who had raised him up and nurtured him into a talent. Even if he was really guilty, he shouldn't say it himself. Moreover, his master had always been a passive recipient and victim in this matter. Therefore, Wei Wuyan resolutely gave up on seeking help and went to save his master alone. In order to avoid making things difficult for Chu Yang, he didn't say goodbye to Chu Yang when he left. What you said is the truth and reasonable, but you're too direct. Chu Yang walked over and complained. You mean you're on Wei Wuyan's side? Zi Xiecheng turned to look at Chu Yang, her gaze deep and serene. Yes, Chu Yang nodded without hesitation. Even if what you said is reasonable, but there's one thing you can't change. That's his master. In other words, if the person you're looking for had made such a mistake and others were scolding him in front of you, what would you do? Zi Xiecheng's gaze turned cold. No one can scold him in front of me, Chu Yang said coldly. But you scolded Wei Wuyan's master in front of him. Put yourself in his shoes, what would you do? Wei Wuyan is already very polite to you. Zi Xiecheng's gaze froze. You're criticizing me? Why can't I? Chu Yang sneered. Is it because your cultivation is high that no one has criticized you before? Should everyone be afraid of you and coax you? If that's the case, then you've misjudged me. I've tolerated you along the way only because you're a woman, and I'm a man. That's all. If you think that I'm afraid of you, hee, I'll look down on your IQ. What an unyielding man. Zi Xiecheng said, not knowing whether she was praising or belittling him. Then, her voice suddenly softened and she said softly, I know that you men have your self-esteem, but women also have their own pursuits and bottom lines. A man's bottom line is whether a woman is loyal, but a woman's bottom line is whether a man is responsible. A man like Wei Wuyan's master is an irresponsible man. Even if his martial arts are high, he's still not a good match for a woman. I've been to countless plains, and in most of them, men are superior to women. It's normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. I admit this, but even if some men have 3 wives and 4 concubines, each of his wives and concubines loves him to the core. Why? Because this man is worthy of their love. And some men can only marry 1 wife in their lifetime, but his wife will make him a cuckold. Why? Because this man is not worthy of his wife's loyalty. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. Every woman is willing to be faithful to her husband until they grow old. No woman is born a slut. Do you understand this, Chu Yang? I understand, but it doesn't mean that I agree. Chu Yang said angrily. If you want to apologize, say it properly. Don't use such a condescending tone. Do others owe you anything? Zi Xiecheng chuckled and said indifferently. What I said just now hurt Wei Wuyan's self-esteem. I will apologize to him for this later. Right is right, wrong is wrong. No matter how high my cultivation is, I've never denied doing something wrong. But I apologize to Wei Wuyan because I shouldn't have scolded his master in front of him. Not because I scolded him wrongly. When I see his master, I'll still scold him to his face. I need to make this clear in advance. Chu Yang was speechless. Facing such a stubborn person, he really couldn't do anything about it. Let's go. Otherwise, Wei Wuyan will lose his life, Zi Xiecheng said lightly. Then she laughed and said, Actually, if I don't send Wei Wuyan away alone, how can you go up and risk your life to enter the Tao state? She smiled and led the way. At this time, you still haven't forgotten about that. Chu Yang was speechless and followed closely. After walking for less than 10 feet, Zi Xiecheng suddenly turned her head and revealed a strange smile. What? Chu Yang asked vigilantly. You have to remember what I said just now. Zi Xiecheng smiled and said. What? Chu Yang was alarmed. You have to think carefully about what you can do to deserve a woman's love. Zi Xiecheng laughed and said. Otherwise, if one of your future wives cheats on you, don't blame me for not reminding you. Chu Yang was fuming with anger and said without thinking. If I have a wife who cheats on me in the future, the one who cheats on me will definitely be you. Zi Xiecheng's face turned red and then cold. Then she said coldly, Chu Yang, you're so bold. You actually dare to tease me? Chu Yang said angrily. Are you the only one who's allowed to tease me? Zi Xiecheng nodded slowly and said, You wait. Then she turned and left. Chu Yang followed her and thought, Damn it with your behavior, not to mention whether I'll be cheated on. Even if you give yourself to me, I won't dare to accept it. Damn it. Who the hell can take it? Besides, she's a woman who has lived for hundreds of thousands of years. She's a peerless old woman. Chu Yang looked at the slim figure in front of him and thought, although I won't accept it even if you give yourself to me, I have to admit that this peerless old woman is also a peerless beautiful old woman. Chapter 917. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Zi Xiecheng carried Chu Lu on her back and sped along with Chu Yang. The speed of the two was so fast that it didn't take long for them to reach the foot of the mountain that Wei Wuyan named Little Green Mountain. Net. Chu Yang released his divine senses and couldn't help but be shocked. There were at least 30 to 40 experts searching around this Little Green Mountain, but from the looks of it, they hadn't found Wei Wuyan's master, Hong Wuliang. If they had found him, these people would have retreated long ago. Wei Wuyan went to the southwest direction. His movements are very careful. Zi Xiecheng frowned and listened for a while. Then she said, "It seems that his master has been placed in the southwest direction." Chu Yang nodded. Since he's living in seclusion and doesn't want others to know, then even if he's in the mountains, he won't build any houses. That's too eye-catching. So, Wei Wuyan and his master must be living in a very secretive cave. Let's go over. Zi Xiecheng smiled. Although I don't like a master like him, since you want to help him, I can only help you. Chu Yang snapped his fingers. After knowing each other for so long, this sentence of yours makes me feel the most comfortable. Zi Xiecheng frowned and looked at him meaningfully. Then she said 3 times. Chu Yang said calmly 3. What Zi Xiecheng meant was that Chu Yang already owed her 3 times of abuse. At this critical juncture, she would keep it in mind for the time being. Chu Yang wasn't in a hurry. Anyway, I'm going to improve my strength. You're going to abuse me? You can help me improve, and I can also earn elixirs from you. Yes, 1 at a time, 3 at a time. Let's go, said Zi Xiecheng. Okay. Chu Yang was energized. Let's go over secretly. Go over secretly? Zi Xiecheng looked at him in surprise. Why do we have to go over secretly? Fight it out in the open. These people are really not enough for me to blow on. Chu Yang's head was full of sweat. They are not enough for you to blow on. But you won't do anything. The only one who will do anything is me, the coolie. I'm here, don't be afraid. Zi Xiecheng patted her chest, full of confidence. Net. Chu Yang had a bitter look on his face as he followed this big sister out in large strides. She was valiant and spirited. He had only taken about 10 steps when he heard someone say, "Who is it?" Chu Yang swaggered and said, "It's me." A black-clothed man appeared in front of a tree. He suspiciously looked at Chu Yang. "Who are you?" Chu Yang laughed. "I am who I am." The black-clothed man's face darkened. His eyes were filled with mockery and cruelty. "You're you? Who do you think you are?" Chu Yang twisted his neck and said with a smile, "If you're not mistaken, I'm a man." The black-clothed man's face changed, and he said furiously, "Bastard." Chu Luer, who was at the side, couldn't help but giggle. These 3 questions and 3 answers made him not know whether to laugh or cry. This person's question was very regular, but Chu Yang's answer was purely a stroke of genius. The black-robed man looked in the direction of the laughter and saw Zi Xiecheng standing beside Chu Luer. Zi Xiecheng's clothes were as white as snow, and her hair was like clouds. She just stood there, but it was as if she was standing in the moonlight. This ordinary place was suddenly filled with a celestial aura when she stood there. It made people feel that this was not the human world at all. Instead, it should be a bejeweled jade palace, a sky-high pavilion. No one could describe her beauty, and no one could describe her appearance in detail. In short, she was like a celestial fairy who had suddenly descended to the human world. She stood there quietly, her face cold and indifferent. Naturally, she was filled with an unattainable aura. She was high above, incomparable, holy and noble, and unparalleled in the world. The black-clothed man's face was originally full of anger, but it suddenly changed. His face was still angry, but it froze, and his eyes revealed a look of intoxication. He unconsciously stared at Zi Xiecheng, his mouth wide open, and saliva flowed out from the corners of his mouth. Chu Yang sighed in his heart. Damn it, I knew it would be like this. This guy was a martial monarch, and he was at least 100 years old. Seeing a beauty, he actually had such an expression. It could be seen that Zi Xiecheng's allure was unimaginable. Templar noticing that the black-robed man was looking at her rudely, Zi Xiecheng frowned unhappily. It was just a frown, but it was clear that he was not happy to see her looking at him like that. That was what it meant. The black-clothed man suddenly woke up with a start and let out an ah. Suddenly, he was at a loss of what to do. His face actually turned red, and his 2 hands started grabbing and pinching here and there. He actually acted like an innocent young man who suddenly saw his dream lover. Even though Chu Yang was extremely depressed in his heart, he couldn't help but find it a little funny at this moment. Bro, you don't know, right? The woman in front of you is old enough to be your 18 generations of ancestors' great-grandmother. What's your name, miss? The black-clothed man had been silent for a long time, and finally managed to ask such a question. Chu Yang was depressed, but he still wanted to hold his belly and laugh out loud. You're already so old. Don't tell me you still want to pick up girls? Zi Xieching didn't say anything. She only looked at Chu Yang with her beautiful eyes. The black-clothed man suddenly woke up and turned to look at Chu Yang. The cruelty in his eyes was gone, and it was replaced by envy, jealousy, and hatred. Then, his whole face turned purple, as if he had a feud with Chu Yang for killing his father and stealing his wife. You little bastard! The black-clothed man shouted furiously. Little bastard! You're actually so beautiful. You actually dared to trick me? This is intolerable. Today, I don't care which clan you're from. Since you've offended me, consider yourself unlucky. Chu Yang felt a little dizzy. How could he not understand that what this bastard really wanted to say was, you actually have such a beautiful wife. This is intolerable. But when the words reached his mouth, he changed his mind. Even if I have such a beautiful wife, it has nothing to do with you, right? Chu Yang looked at this impulsive old man with interest. What do you want? Only then did he suddenly realize that there was a lifelike orchid embroidered on the collar and cuffs of this black-clothed man. Someone from the Long clan? Chu Yang was stunned. Isn't this the law enforcement interrogation hall? Why is he from the Long clan? The black-clothed man said furiously. What do I want? Humph. If you kneel down obediently now and kowtow to me 3 times, I'll let you off. Let you off. He said 2 sentences consecutively and suddenly said with a red face. Let your woman apologize to me again, and I'll spare your life. Towards the end, not only did he muster up the courage to say his true intentions, he even changed the way he addressed himself as old man to old man. Presumably, this martial monarch must have suddenly remembered that old man was not suitable for beautiful woman. Old man was more like it. Chu Yang looked at him worriedly. Even if you're blinded by beauty, you should be able to tell that the person standing in front of you is also a martial monarch who's not inferior to you, right? How could you say such brainless words? Little one, are you willing to listen to old man's judgment? The black-clothed man shouted angrily as he stole glances at Zi Xieching. Looking at her, he didn't care whether she was a martial monarch or a supreme martial artist. He was already distracted. Chu Yang sighed. I'm not willing. You're willing? That's good. What? You're saying that you're not willing? The black-clothed man was furious. You're asking for trouble. He actually rushed over in large strides with an aggressive aura. He actually wanted to fight. Chu Yang sighed gloomily and raised his right hand. With a clang, before Chu Yang's sword was out, the scabbard on the black-clothed man's waist suddenly shook violently. A shining long sword automatically came out of the scabbard and stood upright in the wind, shining with a cold light. The black-clothed man exclaimed, Sword Sovereign! He suddenly stopped and felt that something wasn't right. He looked at Chu Yang carefully and his face finally darkened. Sword Sovereign, you're awake. Chu Yang looked at him with a half-smile. The black-clothed man took 2 steps back and looked a little conflicted. He knew clearly that he couldn't defeat a Sword Sovereign. Even if the other party was only a first-grade Sword Sovereign, with his strength, he might not be able to defeat him. But if he called for help this peerless beauty, he wouldn't have a share. Especially that perverted 7th young master. He looked at Zi Xieching reluctantly and sighed dejectedly. Suddenly, he looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. His voice carried a few strange syllables, which floated up into the sky. After all, his life was more important. Not long after he let out the howl, a gust of wind blew over. More than 10 people came from all directions. A calm and gloomy voice said, What's the matter? Then, there was a sudden sound, as if they were stunned. Then there were many similar sounds. Obviously, these people were all stunned by Zi Xieching's beauty when they saw her. Chu Yang looked over and saw 3 people on the left, 3 on the right, 3 behind him, and 2 in front of him. Including the black-clothed man, there were exactly 12 people. Among them were martial monarchs. There were 4 people whose cultivation levels couldn't be determined. They must be martial saints. A young duke in a long brocade robe, holding a folding fan, stood tall and straight. He looked elegant and graceful. Beside this young duke, there was a man in his 30s. Just by standing there casually, he was already as unshakable as a high mountain. These people all had one thing in common. That was, there was a lifelike orchid embroidered on their collars and sleeves. Everyone looked at Zi Xieching, unable to take their eyes off her. Ever since the young duke arrived, his peach blossom-like eyes were fixed on Zi Xieching. The more he looked at her, the more passionate his gaze became. Suddenly he laughed loudly. "Gu Mu, you've done a great service for me this time. Ha ha ha. When I go back this time, I'll reward you handsomely." The black-clothed man's mouth twitched and he said, "Thank you, young master." That young man couldn't be bothered with him. He already walked towards Zi Xieching impatiently. "Miss, I'm Lan Ruoyan from the Long clan. May I know how to address you?" He only had eyes for this otherworldly beauty. He didn't even look at Chu Yang from the corner of his eyes. Chapter 918. Zi Xieching said coldly, "What does it have to do with you how I address you?" As she said, she pulled Chu Lo and walked behind Chu Yang. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that she had come to seek protection from a man, after seeing that the other party was outnumbered. Chu Yang instantly rolled his eyes. Lan Ruoyan was obviously a member of the Long clan, and from the looks of it, he was a male cousin of the Long clan. Just one look at his expression, and one could tell that this guy was a lecher. When such a person saw a beauty like Zi Xieching, he was simply like a fly that saw honey. He would rather be smashed into pieces than to get close to her. Zi Xieching was as cold as ice and frost. Her cold temperament that kept people 1,000 miles away made Lan Ruoyan even happier and more interested. It seemed that all men had a common problem. The more difficult it was to conquer a woman, the greater the sense of accomplishment. This was a common problem for all men, and this Duke Lan was no exception. Out of the 12 people from the Long clan, 11 of them were already dazzled. Only the man in his 30s standing beside Lan Ruoyan felt slightly uneasy. He also felt strange in his heart. There were only one man and 2 women in front of him, and only this man had some ability, but he was only a monarch-level martial artist. As for the 2 women, one was a little girl, and the other woman looked like she was only a zone-level martial artist. They were even weaker. But why did he have a feeling that a disaster was about to befall him? With his cultivation as a first-grade supreme martial artist, he shouldn't have such a feeling. 7th young master, in my opinion, it's better not to complicate matters. We'd better complete the law enforcement master's task as soon as possible and return to report. If the Yi clan and Zhuge clan are ahead of us, it'll be a great loss of face for the Long clan. After pondering for a while, he finally trusted his intuition. Because his intuition had never lied to him. Lan Ruoyan waved his folding fan and looked at Zi Xieching smilingly. As for Chu Yang, he was directly ignored by him. He said casually, "Granduncle Han, that matter isn't urgent. They haven't found it after searching for a few days. I don't believe that they will find it at this moment. Besides, the matter here is also very important." That Granduncle Han sighed and thought, "What's so important about the matter here? It's just that you've belittled his wife." On the other side, Chu Yang thought to himself, so it wasn't the law enforcement officers who came out this time? Instead, it was that Lang Yilong who had mobilized the 3 super clans and gotten them to do the dirty work for him? If that was the case, would there still be people from the Yi clan and the Zhuge clan here? He wondered. Who were the representatives of those 2 families? "Little miss, you haven't heard of me, Lan Ruoyan, right?" Lan Ruoyan smiled and said proudly, "Then you should have heard of Long clan, right? As for the little girl beside you," he pointed at Chu Yang with his folding fan and said disdainfully, "Who does he think he is? Miss, if you follow me, I guarantee that you'll live a carefree and happy life. It's better than following this little 4 Cs and suffering all kinds of hardships." Zi Xieching said coldly, "My fiancé is highly skilled in martial arts and is the number 1 among the younger generation. He is said to be invincible among experts of the same level. He is a great man with an indomitable spirit. You are just a young man from an aristocratic family. How can you be better than my fiancé?" "Fiancé? Just fiancé?" Lan Ruoyan's eyes lit up instantly. "Ha ha ha. Just fiancé is great." He tilted his head and said to Chu Yang, "Little girl, I'm not going to play games with you. In short, such a beauty is not someone you can handle. Get lost obediently. If I'm in a good mood, I'll spare your life." Seeing that he was surrounded by his own people, this young master actually tore off all his pretense and put on a posture of snatching. It was obvious that this young master wanted to snatch a girl by force. Chu Yang said coldly, "Whether she can handle it or not still depends on the real skills." He was really not interested in talking to this bunch of lechers now. He might as well cut the Gordian knot. "Let's fight." "You actually want to fight?" Lan Ruoyan laughed out loud, as if he had heard a great joke. He tilted his head and said lightly, "Who wants to fight with this invincible expert of the same level?" A man in his 40s stepped forward and said calmly, "Master Qigong, this young man's cultivation is not bad. Ordinary monarchs may not be able to take him down. Let me fight him." Lan Ruoyan grinned, revealing a cruel arc. He said in a low voice, "Kill." This man nodded heavily. He turned over and faced Chu Yang. He said lightly, "Young man, what's your name? Which clan are you from?" Chu Yang said coldly, "If I tell you which clan I'm from, will you not snatch my wife? What's the use of telling you?" The man's eyes didn't move. He said, "If you tell me now, there's still room for negotiation if we have a relationship. If you don't blame me for being merciless." Chu Yang laughed. "Then be merciless." The man's eyes flickered. He said lightly, "Good, good, good." Suddenly, with a clang, he unsheathed his sword and pointed the tip of the sword forward. He said, "I'm Guan Gu, the leader of the guards of the Long clan. Don't forget my name on the road to the netherworld. Junior, you must remember, don't find a wife that's too beautiful. That's not a blessing in love, but a disaster." Chu Yang laughed mockingly. A small leader of the guards actually dares to call himself I. Guan Gu was furious. He leaped forward. Chu Yang didn't dare to be negligent. His eyes were cold and fierce. He shook his arms. A clang came from Guan Gu's sword. His sword, which was originally pointed forward, suddenly stood vertically at this moment. The tip of the sword pointed straight at the sky. Courtesy of the sword, everyone behind him exclaimed in unison. Someone exclaimed, "Guan Gu, be careful. This young man is actually a sword sovereign." The muscles on Guan Gu's face twitched. He didn't need anyone to remind him. At this moment, he also knew that he had encountered a hot potato. Sword energy rose from Chu Yang's body. It was as if a heavenly deity with thunderbolts all over his body was standing in front of him. At this moment, his body was like a sword, his eyebrows were like a sword, and his eyes were like a sword. His whole person was like a peerless divine sword that was suddenly unsheathed. Beside Lan Ruoyan, that person sighed softly. A sword sovereign who's not even 20 years old. This time he's really in big trouble. Lan Ruoyan raised his eyebrows and said, "So what if he's a sword sovereign who's not even 20 years old? As long as we kill him, who will know about this matter?" He knew what Granduncle Han meant. A sword sovereign who's not even 20 years old. The force behind him must be very terrifying. It wasn't that an ordinary force could nurture a sword sovereign who's not even 20 years old. Granduncle Han sighed. His gaze was solemn. "Since this matter has started, we mustn't leave any future troubles behind. Seventh young master, you really have to change your bad habit of flirting with other women. Otherwise, sooner or later, you'll get into big trouble." Lan Ruoyan nodded and said, "Don't worry, Granduncle Han. As long as I get this girl, I'm afraid that I won't have any interest in other ordinary women." Granduncle Han looked at Zi Xiecheng attentively and nodded in agreement. "This isn't a lie. With this girl's beauty, she's unparalleled in the whole heavens." Lan Ruoyan smiled and said, "After her fiancé dies, how can she, a weak girl, escape from my hands?" This Granduncle Han stared at the scene and said in a low voice, "Although this young man is a sword emperor, Guan Gu is already at the peak of the monarch grade. His cultivation has reached the saint grade. His realm is not there yet, but he can be called a half-saint. And this young man obviously hasn't reached the martial monarch level yet. If Guan Gu wants to kill him, it won't take much effort." Lan Ruoyan smiled excitedly. "Then quickly kill him. I can't wait. That little girl is really too tempting." As he said, he actually swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Granduncle Han nodded and didn't speak anymore. But that inexplicable feeling of suffocation in his heart still lingered. He was extremely puzzled. Why on earth would I have such a feeling in my heart? Except for me, there's obviously no other powerful expert here. This matter is too strange. On the other side, Zi Xieching's divine sense spread out silently. She said to Chu Yang via voice transmission, Wei Wuyan has already found his teacher, but those people haven't found them yet. Don't worry and fight. Once there's a situation over there, I'll deal with it immediately. Don't worry, with me watching over them, they'll be fine. Chu Yang nodded and said via voice transmission, Then you have to be careful. Zi Xieching revealed a confident smile. I don't want anyone to die. In this world, no one can kill under my watch. Very good. Then I'll kill all these people first. Chu Yang snorted. It was one thing for a woman to be beautiful, and another thing for a man to appreciate a woman's beauty. But this kind of man who wanted to snatch other people's beautiful wives, no matter in his previous life or this life, Chu Yang would kill anyone he saw. After Lan Ruoyan said those words, even if it wasn't for the Tao state and cultivation, Chu Yang would definitely not let Lan Ruoyan off today. Letting such a villain off would really be letting his conscience down. Chu Yang laughed. He straightened his body and unsheathed his sword. At the moment when the sword was unsheathed, except for that person standing beside Lan Ruoyan, the other people's sword sheaths at their waists vibrated violently at the same time, and let out a neat sword cry. With a touch of stunning sword light, the sword pierced out like flowing water. Guan Gu's pupils contracted. When Chu Yang's sword pierced over, he clearly felt that there was a sea in front of him. The huge waves of the sea were coming slowly from afar, but with the momentum of wind and thunder. Although it looked gentle, it carried a power that could sweep the world. Zi Xieching's eyes lit up. Chu Yang's soft water sword intent was already infinitely close to great success. His first move already carried the soft water sword intent. Chu Yang's eyes were calm, and his face was calm. He silently recited a sentence in his heart. When your fighting spirit is as high as boiling and your vital energy and blood are as calm as ice and snow, then you'll be invincible in the world. Guan Gu's eyes turned cold, and his sword went up to meet Chu Yang's attack. Chu Yang's sword was as soft as spring water, and looked slow and sluggish, but Guan Gu's sword was as fast as lightning. Both of them drew their swords at the same time, but right in between them, when both of their arms were about to straighten, the two swords clashed. The onlookers weren't mediocre. At this moment, all of them could tell. The two swords that looked fast and slow were actually equally fast. When the two swords clashed, they actually stagnated for a while, and strangely didn't make any sound at all. The next moment, with a flash of Chu Yang's black clothes, the soft water sword intent suddenly erupted and turned into raging waves. Chapter 919. Countless sword auras were sent out at the same time. Like soft water plants and vines, they danced and twined gently, pouncing on Guan Gu's sword auras. And Chu Yang himself retreated lightly, as if he was weightless. He retreated 100 feet. Zi Xieching's eyes lit up. Chu Yang had actually entered the Tao state in such a short period of time. This was the best way to deal with the current situation. The opponent was obviously trying to break Chu Yang's soft water-like sword intent forcefully with his tyrannical strength. Chu Yang retreated now. The sword aura was still there, but the opponent couldn't attack him anymore. But from this point, it could be seen that Chu Yang didn't want to fight for a long time. The opponent had too many people and too many experts. If Chu Yang wanted to kill someone, he had to create an opportunity for the expert beside Lan Ruoyan to not be able to save him in time. Guan Gu's long sword slashed left and right. The audience could actually see the green sword aura drifting in all directions. Granduncle Han frowned. My sword technique is too weird. How did Guan Gu fall into a passive state at the first encounter? The situation is a little bad. As he said, he took a small step forward. At this moment, Guan Gu broke free from Chu Yang's sword aura. He suddenly raised his arm and pierced forward. His sword turned into flowing light. The man and the sword became a straight line at this moment, parallel to the ground. At this moment, the long sword pierced the air in front of him and made a boom sound. This sword strike actually produced a sonic boom. Wind-snatching sword. Granduncle Han frowned even more. This is Guan Gu's desperate move. He actually used it at the second move. Guan Gu was already a little angry. He came out full of confidence and promised solemnly. But he was forced into a disadvantageous position by the opponent at the first move. And that entangled sword aura made him feel a little suffocated and uncomfortable. Facing the opponent, he even felt a little scared. The opponent is just a 5th stage sword sovereign. How can he make me feel scared? Guanggu was furious. He directly launched his most powerful move without hesitation. He wanted to kill the opponent in front of him with one move. Chu Yang's retreating momentum had stopped. At this moment, facing the opponent's lightning-like sword, he actually rose into the air as well. He and his sword formed a straight line in the air parallel to the ground. His sword flashed as he shot through the air. Both Guanggu and Chu Yang did the same. The spectators couldn't help but cry out in surprise when they saw this. This was clearly a suicidal move. Could it be that this was only the second move? And they were going to perish together, exchanging a life for a life? Based on their current distance and sword momentum, it was already impossible for them to change their moves. There was only one result in such a duel. You stab your sword into my head, and I stab my sword into your head. There would never be a second outcome. Lan Ruoyan also exclaimed. Then, a hint of viciousness appeared in his eyes. It's good that Guanggu died together with this little guy. Anyway, no matter what, if this little guy dies, I'll just get that woman into my bed. Who cares who dies? The two swords faced each other head-on. Cold light flickered, and both of them had calm gazes. Guanggu's hair fluttered behind him, and his clothes rustled. His whole person was like a javelin flying at high speed. Chu Yang's gaze was cold, and his expression was calm. At this moment, his fighting spirit was boiling, and his killing intent was surging. However, his heart was as still as ice. In the land of Tao, this was the first time that he had reached such a sword state. His whole body was filled with an indescribable cold killing intent. This person must be killed. Not only him. Chu Yang wouldn't let any of these people, who were present today, off if he could kill them. Young Thug was lecherous, and only lecherous. After all, everyone was lecherous. After seeing a beautiful woman, who wouldn't want to take a few more glances? But the reason why he developed into possession and snatching by force had a lot to do with these evil slaves. If these people didn't add fuel to the fire, how could a young man become a young thug on his own? No matter how evil his nature was? Seeing that Lan Ruoyan didn't hold back in front of these people and directly snatched a woman, Chu Yang knew that these people were already used to such things. He didn't know how many times these bastards had helped Lan Ruoyan. Therefore, Lan Ruoyan didn't hold back in front of them and was unscrupulous. So many loving couples who should have grown old together were ruined in the hands of these bastards. Young thugs should be killed. These accomplices should be killed even more. The killing intent in Chu Yang's heart was even stronger. Seeing that the two swords were about to cross each other and pierce into each other's head, both parties didn't have the intention to change their moves. At this moment, even if they wanted to, it was already too late. Everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths. They stared with their eyes wide open, as if blood would splatter in the next moment. Guanggu's eyes finally revealed a trace of regret and panic. In his opinion, this young man opposite him was just bluffing. After all, not everyone didn't want to live. Besides, this young man had such a peerless beauty beside him. All the more he wouldn't want to die. This battle was nothing more than a competition of courage. Whoever could persist till the end would win. Therefore, he didn't dodge and directly thrust his sword forward. But until the moment of contact, the other party was actually even calmer than him. He was even more unafraid of death than him. This made Guanggu's mind in a mess. Damn it, you're fucking serious with me. At this moment, Guanggu shouted in his heart. I'm finished. This time, I'm going to die with you. But I've just used my wind-snatching sword, and only used one move. I've lost big time. Others couldn't see the change in Guanggu's expression. But how could Chu Yang, who was facing her, not see it? Chu Yang's eyes revealed a trace of mockery. A sword tip flashed with cold light, and magnified infinitely in front of Chu Yang. Chu Yang, who was in the Tao state, had already accurately captured the trajectory of the other party's sword, and the direction of the sword tip. The next moment, ding! A soft sound froze everyone's nerves at this moment. All the spectators, including the supreme martial artist beside Lan Ruoyan, were dumbfounded. They almost couldn't believe their eyes. Just in midair, the scene seemed to have been frozen. Two swords, sword tip against sword tip, actually froze in midair. How big was the sword tip? The sword tip of a sword was definitely comparable to the tip of a needle, even to the extent that this kind of divine sword that had been through hundreds of battles and drank blood, the sword tip was even smaller than the tip of a needle. However, such a smiling existence, in such a rapid battle, under such a terrifying speed, the two swords actually miraculously froze in midair. Not only did the sword tip meet the sword tip, but it also made a sound that clearly passed into everyone's ears. This showed how much strength both parties used in the battle. Guanggu felt relieved. He only felt sweat drenching his clothes. He immediately decided, I'll never risk my life to fight with this crazy little guy again. He's really too scary. This time it's really pure luck. As long as I fall from midair, I'll immediately use my wind-snatching sword and chop this little guy into minced meat at the fastest speed. Damn it, I'm scared to death. However, the next moment, Guanggu's relieved eyes suddenly turned into fear, despair and disbelief, because the sword tip of Chu Yang's sword actually emitted a strange force. Immediately, Guanggu realized that this sword that had accompanied him for his whole life was suddenly cut apart by the other party's sword, just like a fresh bamboo that was cut apart by the other party's sword. Guanggu's sword was cut into two pieces with a swoosh. With a swoosh, it reached the sword hilt, and the other party's sword rushed in between the two pieces of sword. The phrase "like a hot knife through butter" was absolutely appropriate here. The long sword cut open the tip of Guanggu's sword, the edge of Guanggu's sword, and the hilt of Guanggu's sword. It pierced into Guanggu's arm like a lightning bolt. With a bang, Guanggu's arm exploded like a piece of bamboo. The next moment, swoosh, a soft sound, Chu Yang's long sword had already pierced into Guanggu's forehead, through his skull, and deep into his brain. At this moment, the sword energy burst out from the sword tip like a raging wave. The sword tip continued to move forward, and a cold light appeared at the back of Guanggu's head. It was stained with blood, dripping and shining. With a swoosh, Chu Yang sheathed his sword. He somersaulted in midair and kicked Guanggu's head. Guanggu's body flew out like a broken sack. His black clothes fluttered as he flew back in midair. Only then did a stream of blood spurt out from Guanggu's forehead, as if to attack Chu Yang. However, as Chu Yang retreated, the blood could not reach Chu Yang at all. Chu Yang landed on the ground, and the stream of blood that spurted out also landed on the ground. It was 1 foot away from Chu Yang's feet. Guanggu's body retreated straight back in the air, following the trajectory that he had just flown in. His body was flat, and blood spurted out from his forehead and the back of his head at the same time. It was as if 2 blood fountains had suddenly appeared in the air. Guanggu had lost all consciousness. At that moment, Chu Yang, while he was still in shock, the sword energy exploded in his mind, and instantly collapsed along his meridians, destroying his dantian. All of his life force, all of his consciousness, all of his divine will, were completely and utterly destroyed at that moment. From escaping death to complete death, Guanggu did not even have time to moan or say a word. Poof! Guanggu's body flew back and fell on the ground softly. He did not even twitch, and he was already silent. Everyone in the Long clan was dumbfounded, looking at Guanggu's corpse. Their minds were blank. There were too many unexpected things. No one had expected that things would turn out like this. Firstly, no one had expected that the two parties would stab each other. Secondly, it was even more unexpected that the sword tips would touch each other. Then, Guanggu's sword would suddenly split open, and the other party would seize the opportunity to kill him. This was even more unbelievable and ridiculous. However, the appearance of these 3 factors had caused the death of a half-martial saint. Killing a half-martial saint with 2 moves. This black-clothed youth who looked so handsome and confident was actually so ruthless in his actions. After a while, everyone's gaze lifted up from Guanggu's corpse and looked at Chu Yang. Their gazes had already changed. "Young man, you're quite capable. I also quite like the sword in your hand." Lan Ruoyan smiled. Without even looking at Guanggu's corpse, he said directly to Chu Yang, Your sword. What kind of sword is it? Leave the sword and the woman behind, and you can leave. I won't pursue the matter of you killing my subordinate. Chapter 920. At such a time, he actually started to care about Chu Yang's sword. Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Net, this guy's eyesight is not bad. He can actually tell that my sword is not an ordinary one. Chu Yang said coldly. My sword is only used to kill people. I will never give it away. If you kill me, the sword is yours, and so is the woman. But if you can't kill me, the sword is not yours, the woman is not yours, and your life is not yours. Lan Royan snorted and shouted. Who's going to kill him for me? At the side, Granduncle Han said in a low voice. 5th Gene, you go. A burly man came out. He was holding a purple gold saber. He looked at Chu Yang and said, Little one, you're an evil slave. Chu Yang interrupted. 5th Jin's face changed instantly. You're an evil slave. Chu Yang raised his sword and said, Come up and die. I'm not interested in hearing your name. 5th Jin roared and rushed up with his saber. Chu Yang smiled and went up with his sword. The two of them were entangled together instantly. Granduncle Han, you should be able to take down 5th Jin, right? Lan Royan looked at Zi Xieching, who was standing quietly in the distance, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. His eyes were already a little red. He was thinking about what he would do after he got her. As he thought of this, he had already set up a tent under his crotch. 5th Jin is a second-grade martial saint. It's a piece of cake for him to take down this little one. Granduncle Han said faintly. Except for the 2 Jin brothers and me, the rest of the people here will only die if they go up. That's good, Lan Royan said joyfully. But, 7th young master, even if this young man dies in our hands, this matter must not be spread out. Once it's leaked out, it'll definitely be a huge disaster. Granduncle Han warned worriedly. To be able to cultivate such a person, he must be a reclusive high-level supreme martial artist. If the other party comes to find us, then, even the Lan clan will be in chaos. Even we can't protect you. Lan Royan said disapprovingly. No matter how powerful he is, can he be stronger than a heaven-layer great clan? Granduncle Han sighed and didn't say anything. He thought, you are so ignorant. In this layer of heaven, there are many people that the big clans are afraid of. Let's take the most obvious example. Ning Tianya, Buluqing, Yulingxue Fengyuro. Any big clan that offended any one of these 4 would face a devastating disaster. In the arena, the battle between the two was getting more and more intense. Net at the side of the arena, Zi Xieching's 2 small hands were hidden in her sleeves as she made mysterious gestures. Waves of Tao state aura, which were hard to see with the naked eye, flowed into her palms from the battlefield like rivers flowing into the sea. Now, her control was more delicate and cautious than when she was in the Black Blood Forest. All the Tao state energy was controlled by her invisibly, and not a single bit leaked out. In this way, only Zi Xieching and Chu Yang himself knew that Chu Yang had entered the Tao state. Others couldn't detect it at all. Even this first-grade supreme martial artist, who was standing beside Lan Royan, couldn't detect the real background of this young sword emperor in front of him. Thus, he kept making wrong decisions, which allowed Chu Yang to achieve the greatest training effect. Chu Yang was already in a tough battle. This 5th Jin was a true second-grade martial saint expert. Once the battle started, Chu Yang felt the pressure as if a mountain was pressing down on him. The other party's purple gold saber was like a wild dragon that overturned rivers and seas. It was powerful and heavy, and every slash carried with it the sound of wind and thunder. Moreover, although the other party was tall and burly, his body movements were extremely agile. His body moved with the saber, and he became one with the saber. Purely based on the degree of proficiency, among all the people that Chu Yang had met, only Dong Wuxiang could be compared with this person in terms of proficiency in saber techniques. But in terms of combat power, Dong Wuxiang was far behind 5th Jin. Once the battle started, Chu Yang was in a disadvantageous position. But as his spirit entered the Tao state in the next moment, it became more daunting than dangerous. In the Tao state, the other party's saber attacks were all traceable and could be seen clearly. Although Chu Yang was still in a disadvantageous position, His life was definitely not in danger. He concentrated on using the soft water sword intent, and fought steadily and surely. While the soft water sword intent that borrowed strength to fight strength was protecting himself, it was also slowly, thread by thread, causing the opponent to be entangled with a force. The battle was in a stalemate. Chu Yang's comprehension was also getting deeper and deeper. He even comprehended the saber state at one point in time from the other party's saber light. Net. Although the pressure that Fifth Jin gave him was great, compared to Zi Xieching, it was like heaven and earth. Chu Yang had been fighting with Zi Xieching every day these few days, and he was already used to fighting under such great pressure. At this moment, although he was in a disadvantageous position, he was actually able to cope with it with ease. Although the battle with Zi Xieching was intense and stressful, Chu Yang himself knew that his life was not in danger, so he didn't have any scruples. But the thing that could really push people to improve was always fear. Only when extreme fear was used as pressure could one make the most terrifying outburst. This kind of fear included the fear of death, and the fear of loss. So, to Chu Yang, this moment of life and death crisis was the real experience, the experience of life and death, and the so-called martial world experience and battle experience, that could be engraved in one's bones, could only be formed in such a battle of life and death. Chu Yang's sword was like soft water, rippling gently, while Fifth Jin's saber was like a huge mountain, smashing into the sea fiercely. Although the sea was passively bearing it, and the mountain could cause huge waves when it smashed into the sea, it would still be calm after that. But the mountain would sink to the bottom of the sea, and wouldn't be of any use here. Under such circumstances, the battle between the two of them continued in a cycle. Chu Yang kept changing his body movements, from the fleeting snow cloud steps of Beyond the Heavens sect to the spectral steps of the first generation sword master of the Calamity Sword, and then to the ghost steps, heavenly star steps, 7 steps to heaven that the sword spirit had taught him. He had already switched between 30 to 40 different types of footwork. Sometimes it was gentle, sometimes it was ethereal, sometimes it was strange, sometimes it was illusory. In short, although Fifth Jin had the upper hand in all aspects, the feeling of having nowhere to exert his strength made him, the person who had the upper hand, feel extremely aggrieved. Because from the start of the battle until now, the weapons of both parties had only clashed dozens of times, and from then on, they had never clashed again. What kind of feeling was this? Every strike of the saber struck the void with great force. Time passed bit by bit. Granduncle Han, who was standing beside Lan Ruoyan, slowly felt that something was wrong. This was because Chu Yang's sword momentum had changed. The originally calm sea was now slightly surging with waves. It was as if there was a wind blowing across the sea surface, and the waves were sparkling. Granduncle Han suddenly realized that the battle situation was quietly changing. Fifth Jin's original attack had now become 80%. The opponent had started to counterattack. Just when Granduncle Han realized this, Chu Yang's sword momentum changed again. Waves started to appear on the sparkling sea, like a layer of silver waves rolling over from the sky. Fifth Jin's saber was already a little sluggish. Chu Yang had already changed from 10% attack to 30% attack. Granduncle Han's fingers touched his beard lightly, and he looked worried. Did the opponent do this deliberately? Or was he at the end of his rope? Just when he was hesitating, Chu Yang's sword momentum changed again. The sword moves were like waves rolling up, and the speed became faster and faster, surging forward one after another. Fifth Jin was forced to withdraw his saber. He first defended then attacked. 55. The situation was actually equalized by Chu Yang in an instant. This miraculous reversal left all the spectators dumbfounded, excluding Granduncle Han. Fifth Jin's strength was second only to his big brother, Fourth Jin, and he was definitely ranked second. Second stage martial saint. In the martial world, he was already close to a legendary existence. But at this moment, after fighting with a young man for 2 hours, he was actually able to attack and defend with the opponent? This was simply unbelievable. Where did such a monstrous young man come from? But at this moment, when everyone saw that it was a 50-50 situation, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed drastically. Chu Yang let out a long roar. His long sword shook violently, and he shouted, "Heavenly thunder! Transform into my wild waves!" The sword light suddenly spread out with a buzzing sound. The waves in the sea suddenly surged up to the sky, and the wind and clouds surged. The water was so strong that it seemed to be connected with the sky. Streaks of sword light shone in such waves, as if they were connected with the heaven and the earth. It was as if the thunderbolts in the sky had descended from the sky at this moment, cheering for the wind and waves. The huge wind and waves completely drowned Fifth Gene. Just a moment ago, the two sides were still 55. But at this moment, Fifth Gene didn't even have half a chance to attack, and was only left with pure defense. Yes, defense. Because even if he defended, he might not be able to defend. The soft water sword intent that Chu Yang had set up from the start was densely packed layer by layer. Although Fifth Gene had cut them all off, they didn't disappear. At this moment, with the guidance of Chu Yang's sword momentum, the soft water sword intent that had been scattered for 100 years were all gathered together again. A simple sword intent couldn't affect Fifth Gene's saber technique. But the soft water sword intent that Chu Yang had set up from the start had accumulated more than 10 million sword intents. Now that they were all gathered together, their power was already terrifying. Hundreds of rivers converged into the sea, forming a huge pulling force. Fifth Gene's saber started to deviate from its direction. No matter how hard he tried, even if his face turned red, the saber that was supposed to be facing the front would always deviate a little. In a battle between experts, a slight difference could lead to a huge difference. Fifth Gene had no power to turn the situation around. He could only hold on bitterly. With a few swishing sounds, blood spurted out from Fifth Gene's body. He roared loudly, and waved his saber with all his might. "Fourth Gene, save your brother!" Granduncle Han wanted to do it himself, but he respected his status and ordered Fourth Gene to do it. But it was too late. Thank you to Long Inua for the 400,000 Piao Hong today. Congratulations to Alliance Master Long for becoming the Grand Alliance Master. Thank you to Roaming Dragon 99999, Alliance Master Piao Hong for the tip. Thank you for becoming the Grand Alliance Master. I've always seen you vote, but never enter the group. Thank you to Roaming Dragon 99999, Alliance Master, for the continuous support from Evil Monarch to Grand Alliance Master. Thank you. Thank you to Slight Clear Sorrow Alliance Master Piao Hong for the tip. Thank you for becoming the Grand Alliance Master. Thank you to Red Dust Trouble Alliance Master Piao Hong. I've received Piao Hong many times this month. Thank you for your support. Thank you to I'm Book Maniac 6, Shui Ling Long. Who will the wind flower fall? Battle Breaking Azure Dragon Bear. There are too many people to list them all. I'll organize them into a book of thanks. Thank you all. Chapter 921. If Granduncle Han took action personally without hesitation, he could still save Fifth Gene's life. But he ordered Fourth Gene to take action. It would take time for Daojin Si to hear the order and execute it. If it was a normal battle, this little bit of time wouldn't affect the overall situation at all. But under Chu Yang's sword, this little bit of time was enough to kill. Because the sword light had already converged into a raging sea. The entire sea had been netted, and Fifth Gene was struggling at death's door in this sea of sword light and raging sword energy. Just when Fourth Gene jumped out with a roar, he also heard the last scream of his younger brother. "Ah, I'm not resigned to this." Chu Yang's sword was like the wind, flicking away the purple gold saber. The tip of the sword flashed, and one of Fifth Gene's eyeballs flew out. With another flash, black water flowed out from the other eye. Then, Chu Yang guided the sword, and all the sword energy instantly gathered together and slashed down violently. Then, the waves of sword light could be seen as blood continuously flew up. Pieces of flesh and blood flew up into the air, and pieces of bone splashed out. Chu Yang kept his sword and retreated. He was panting, and his face was already pale. But although he had already retreated, the raging sword light waves didn't disappear. Instead, they were still slashing fiercely. Fourth Gene rushed in with a roar, and slashed the sword energy crazily. When he rushed in, he couldn't help but let out a loud scream. "Brother!" The raging sword light waves dispersed, and Fourth Gene was seen standing there, holding his brother, and roaring towards the sky. He roared towards the sky. Above the heads of the two brothers, countless pieces of flesh and blood fell like a rain of blood, drifting down. It fell on their bodies and faces. Fourth Jean howled towards the sky. His voice was shrill, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Then he carried his brother's corpse with one hand and strode towards Chu Yang, roaring angrily, Little, you killed my brother. You actually dared to kill my brother. You actually dared to. Ah! I'm going to kill you. I'm going to tear you apart." It was only when he walked and swung his arm that everyone noticed Fifth Jin's appearance. They couldn't help but gasp. Fifth Jin, who was in his hand, didn't have any flesh on his body. Even his internal organs had been dug out. He carried his brother's corpse as he walked, and his right hand was actually holding the skeleton's spine. All that was left of his body were white bones. There wasn't even a trace of blood on his body. His entire body was like a skeleton that had been buried in the ground for hundreds of years. There was not a single bit of flesh left. It was clean. Chu Yang's face was pale. He said coldly, "So what if I killed your brother? If you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." Fourth Jin looked up to the sky and roared, his eyes completely red. "Come here, little bastard. Let me kill you." At this moment a soft voice said, "Chu Yang, you can't fight anymore. If he continued to fight, his body would be damaged. Leave these people to me." Chu Yang turned around and smiled. He said, "Okay." The one who spoke was Zi Xieching. Chu Yang had fought 2 battles in a row, and his physical strength had long been overdrawn. How could he continue fighting at this moment? Zi Xieching knew about this. Chu Yang knew about it. And even the remaining 10 people on the other side knew about it. It could also be seen that this young man's sword emperor was already at the end of his tether. Zi Xieching's white dress fluttered, and she stood in front of Chu Yang in a flash. She blocked Chu Yang. Chu Yang smiled and turned around without any worry. He strode towards Chu Luer's position and sat down, panting heavily. Chu Luer massaged his shoulders and his chest, feeling sorry for him. "Big brother, I feel that something is not right," Chu Luer said carefully. "This Sister Z is obviously very powerful, but you have to stand in front of her and be her shield for everything. This makes me feel very uncomfortable." Chu Yang smiled and pinched her little nose. "Little girl, you can also tell this?" After a pause he said, "Don't you know that he wants me to enter the Tao state during the battle to collect the power of the Tao state?" "No." Chu Luer shook her head and shook Chu Yang's hand off her little nose. "I don't think it's so simple." "Of course it's not so simple." Chu Yang smiled and said, "But overall, this matter is beneficial to me, because under her supervision, I want to achieve my own goals and achieve my life's goal. So now, her background is a little unclear, and she is indeed using me as her shield. But there's one thing that you haven't thought about. With her strength, she doesn't need any shield at all." Chu Luer thought and immediately understood. Actually, this matter was just a roundabout problem. You only saw what was in front of you, and seemed to only see Chu Yang fighting for others. No matter what, he would stand up for others. So you felt that it was unfair. But thinking about it, with Zi Xieching's strength, did she need anyone to stand up for her? Did she need any protectors? That was not necessary at all. Not to mention a few playboys and perverts. Even if a peak supreme martial artist came, what could he do? With the current Zi Xieching, even if Ning Tianya and Bu Luqing wanted to stand up for her, she probably wouldn't care. Like what Chu Yang said, now that Chu Yang stood up for her, it wasn't that she was using Chu Yang, but that Chu Yang was actually using her. He would make use of these fierce battles to improve his own cultivation. He would use these battles to solidify his soul, using these endless battles to push his cultivation up step by step to get closer to his goal. Because Chu Yang's goal was to consolidate the heavens without using the Calamity Sword, to protect his brothers. Such a goal, if there wasn't a strong pressure urging him from behind, and just relying on Chu Yang's own hard work, he might not be able to achieve it even in 10,000 years. But with Zi Xieching, it was very different. Because Zi Xieching would always spur him to find different opponents for him to fight, and then improve during the battles. Even if there were no enemies, Zi Xieching still wanted to fight with him. This imperceptibly increased Chu Yang's cultivation by 100 times compared to his original cultivation. And the most impressive thing was, once he met an enemy that he couldn't fight against, Zi Xiecheng would definitely not watch him die. Because once he died, she wouldn't be able to find a second person like him, who could continuously provide her with the power of the Tao state. So this was equivalent to a super bodyguard. Chu Yang felt a little strange. Unlimited benefits were in front of him. But why did this little girl only see him being used by others? At this moment, looking at the slim and graceful Zi Xiecheng in front of him, Fourth Jin was already stunned. Not only was he stunned, even Lan Ruoyan and the rest were stunned. This delicate beauty actually went to fight? With such small arms and legs, she would fall down with a breath. What kind of battle power could she have? Only Granduncle Han, who was standing beside Lan Ruoyan, had a doubtful and serious look on his face at this moment. How did this girl appear in front of that young man? Why didn't I see it clearly? She obviously didn't blink just now. Could it be that this delicate and timid girl is actually a peerless expert? Granduncle Han frowned and pondered in his heart. But he didn't notice that Lan Ruoyan, who was beside him, had already approached Zi Xiecheng lecherously the moment he saw her coming out. This Granduncle Han originally wanted to stop him, but he suddenly thought, if she's really a peerless expert, why didn't she flare up when she was teased by the seventh young master just now? So he gave up the thought of stopping him. Ha ha ha. Beauty, you're not joking, right? Lan Ruoyan swaggered over with an obscene smile all over his face. He said with a salivating face, why don't you fight with me? Let them all go, and we can fight alone? I'll fight with you however you want. Do you want to fight on the bed? Or fight here? Or fight in the water? If there's really no other way, fight on the tree? Ha ha ha. How about it? Zi Xiecheng's eyes were cold. Suddenly, she looked at Lan Ruoyan without any expression. Suddenly she smiled slightly and said, just you? Even your ancestors from 10,000 years ago didn't dare to talk to me like this. Your Lan clan is really bold. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand. Just as her fair hand appeared in the air, it was as if an orchid in an empty valley had suddenly bloomed, giving off a strong fragrance. Looking at this small hand, Lan Ruoyan was instantly distracted. He smiled obscenely and said, your small hand is so white, I wonder if it's soft. He stretched out his hand, wanting to touch it. Right at this moment a strange woo sound suddenly rang out in the air. Lan Ruoyan, who had just stretched out his hand, was a full 20 feet away from Zi Xiecheng, but he seemed to be sucked over and flew over without his feet touching the ground. Zi Xiecheng's small hand, which was as soft as water and as tender as spring onions, seemed to have become a deadly sharp claw at this moment. It clasped onto Lan Ruoyan's head like an iron clamp. Kneel down. Zi Xiecheng's face was cold and indifferent as she said softly. With a slight force, Lan Ruoyan couldn't help but kneel down stiffly, just like a rotten wooden stake. This unforeseen event gave everyone a huge shock. Granduncle Han flew over. Looking at Zi Xiecheng's eyes, he was actually a little shocked. He said, Miss, my young master is young and insensible. He has offended you. Please spare him this time on account of the Lan clan. After a pause he continued, as long as you're willing to let go, we'll leave immediately. We won't dare to pester you anymore. Once an expert made a move, it would be obvious whether he was skilled or not. Zi Xiecheng just stretched out her hand and sucked Lan Ruoyan, who was 20 feet away, into her hand. Granduncle Han instantly knew that the power of this woman was probably not below his own. He couldn't help but feel bitter in his heart. His intuition was indeed right. He had indeed gotten himself into big trouble. Just by looking at the way she grabbed him, he knew that this matter was difficult to handle. Their only hope was to see if the name of the Lan clan was enough to intimidate the other party. Seventh young master was under her control. As long as she wanted to kill him, she could do so easily. He definitely wouldn't be able to save him in time. Besides, even if it was a head-on battle, he also had no confidence in facing this woman, Lan Ruoyan, who was kneeling stiffly under Zi Xiecheng's control, was even more in disbelief. His face was full of shock and disbelief. Even in his dreams, he didn't expect that this peerless beauty, whom he had been thinking of bringing home to ravage, would actually turn into such a terrifying demon. This was really What exactly was going on? Lan Ruoyan wanted to cry. Zi Xiecheng smiled. Long clan? Granduncle Han nodded. Yes. Zi Xiecheng smiled gently. Long clan. You're actually using the Long clan to suppress me. Ha ha ha, but what is the Long clan? Today's update. My monthly votes are now 6,126. I've released the update of 6,170 in advance. Looks like I won't be able to release 10 chapters. I'm also relieved. I'm really exhausted. Chapter 922. Book 7. What crime should be meted out? First update. Granduncle Han's expression changed drastically. He looked at Zi Xiecheng with hostility and wariness. Marshal Yinyang. What was the Long clan? This sentence was taboo in the heavens. Very few people dared to say this. Even the experts from the other big clans didn't dare to say this. This sentence had almost never appeared in this continent. But it finally appeared today. These words came out of the mouth of a beautiful woman with boundless contempt and disdain. Lan Ruoyan's face turned ashen after hearing this sentence. Since this woman didn't put the Long clan in her eyes, wouldn't it mean that he would definitely die if he fell into her hands today? Granduncle Han said with difficulty. Who exactly are you? Do you have any connections with the Long clan? Zi Xiecheng shook her head lightly. No. Granduncle Han forced a smile. We're all people of the pugilistic world. We see each other all the time. As the saying goes, it's impossible for two mountains to meet again. But two people will eventually meet. With your cultivation, you should have boundless magnanimity. Why do you mind such a small misunderstanding from the younger generation? Just raise your hand, and this matter will be over. The Long clan will be forever grateful. Isn't it better to be friends than enemies? Zi Xiecheng laughed. If I didn't have such cultivation today, would this misunderstanding still be a misunderstanding? Granduncle Han was speechless. If you didn't have such cultivation? If you didn't have such cultivation, you would have already been taken to bed by the seventh young master, and played with as you like. What misunderstanding would there still be? But of course, this sentence couldn't be said out loud. At this point, there was really no need to continue. Granduncle Han took a deep breath. His eyes turned cold and he said, Since this is the case, please let go of the seventh young master, and have a fair fight with me. According to the rules of the pugilistic world, the winner is the king. We can do whatever we want. How about that? He puffed up his chest, and a surge of battle intent gushed out like a tide. But he felt helpless in his heart. The opponent's cultivation was unfathomable. He could only use such means to let the seventh young master out of danger first. But he himself would be in danger. He didn't even know if the opponent would agree. Net 724 * continuous updates pure TXT novel. Zi Xiecheng chuckled. You want him to escape first? Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly shouted, How dare you? As she spoke, Fourth Jean had already circled behind her. The distance between them wasn't very far. And he suddenly launched an attack. The purple gold saber, which was exactly the same as his brother's, emitted a dazzling saber radiance that was more than 20 feet long and shot towards Zi Xiecheng. This strike fully displayed Fourth Jin's saint-level power. Even Fourth Jin, who unleashed this strike, thought in his heart, this strike was truly the best strike that he could unleash under such immense pressure. Be it in terms of realm, power, saber style, or saber force, they were all natural and invulnerable. When this saber was slashed out, Fourth Jin could even faintly hear the call of the great Tao, the sound of wind and thunder. His younger brother had died tragically right before his eyes, and he wanted to avenge his younger brother. Yet he was obstructed by this unpredictable enemy. Boundless grief, indignation, and anger transformed into combat strength, battle intent, and a saber strike. This saber strike actually seemed to break through the bottleneck of Fourth Jin's saber skills. Fourth Jin was very confident that he could unleash this saber strike that was full of saint-level comprehension. This was an opportunity. As long as he had this saber strike and focused on cultivation, he would be able to advance by another level in less than a year. This was the true saber skill of a saber saint. The saber radiance left the body and turned into a dragon. A saber strike piercing through the heavens. This was the power of a heavenly saint. Life and death grip. When this saber strike was unleashed, the enemy's life and death would definitely be in his hands. Although it was a pity to kill such a great beauty, but the arrow was already on the bow, and he had no choice but to release it. Granduncle Han was overjoyed. Fourth Jin's saber strike was powerful, ingenious, and just right. Even a supreme martial artist couldn't be indifferent to this saber strike. But as long as the other party reacted, he would be able to snatch the seventh young master back from her hands immediately. However, what happened next made the illusion in Granduncle Han's heart burst like a bubble, and his entire body turned cold. Zi Xiecheng's face was cold. She didn't turn back, but her snow-white left hand suddenly grabbed backward. Net. Her hand gesture even seemed very gentle. The whole sky seemed to darken suddenly. The earth and the sky also seemed to tremble at this moment. The delicate palm and the saber radiance collided. The palm was white and petite, like a blooming orchid. The saber was like lightning, powerful and domineering. The saber radiance was golden and exuded an insufferably murderous aura, with the comprehension of the martial saint level. One was fast and one was slow. One was big and one was small. One was like the collapse of the heavens, while the other was like the gentle ripples of spring water. But Fifth Jin's saber strike, which was far more powerful than lightning and thunder, was actually grabbed by her fair and tender palm. She grabbed that brilliant saber radiance with one hand. That formless saber gleam was actually grabbed by her, as if she was grabbing a snake, holding it in midair. The saber radiance was 20 feet long, and what she grabbed was close to 1/3 of the top. This was the place where the force was the most powerful, and it was actually held in midair by her in such an unimaginable way. Fourth Jin, who was 1.5 feet away, maintained the posture of holding the saber with both hands. He stood there unable to move. What she grabbed was the saber radiance, not the actual body of his saber. But his saber seemed to have met with an invisible and powerful obstruction in the air. He couldn't slash downwards, nor could he retract his saber. It was frozen in midair. At this moment, Zi Xiecheng still didn't turn around. She didn't even turn her shoulders. Her right hand was still clasped on Lan Ruyan's skull, and her eyes were still looking straight ahead, looking at Granduncle Han indifferently. But her left hand had already completely shattered, grabbed and controlled, the Saber Saint's saber. Fourth Jin almost couldn't believe what he was seeing with his eyes. The saber that was as powerful as lightning was actually grabbed like this? But then he felt that something was wrong. With a loud roar, his elemental force gushed out like a tidal wave. He was about to abandon the saber and retreat by himself to escape. But he suddenly realized that the essential chi gushing out from his energy center and into his saber body disappeared without a trace. There was no reaction at all. He wanted to throw the saber away, but at this moment, there was an invisible suction force on the saber, which stuck his palm firmly onto it. He actually couldn't throw it away. Not only couldn't he throw it away, but his body also couldn't move as his elemental force gushed out. Fourth Jin was horrified. The other party. This woman. What exactly is her cultivation? She can actually control me like this? Just as he was thinking, the 5 fingers on Zi Xiecheng's left hand started to move. Her little finger flicked out, and that golden saber light shook violently. Fourth Jin screamed, and felt as if his chest was hit heavily by a big hammer. There was a sharp pain in his chest, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Her ring finger flicked out again, and the golden saber light vibrated. Fourth Jin's palm finally left the handle of the saber, because at this moment, an unparalleled force suddenly came from the saber body. Both his hands let go of the saber handle instantly, as if they had been electrocuted. The saber that no one was using still maintained the posture of slashing down violently, and stayed in the air. But Fourth Jin's body had already rushed forward in a stumbling manner. He actually seemed to be moving on his own. He took 7 to 8 steps, turned half a circle, and circled to the front of Zi Xiecheng's body before stopping. His face was already full of fear. His eyes were filled with despair, and his body was trembling rapidly. Zi Xiecheng said lightly, "Kneel down." Fourth Jin's knees went soft, and he knelt down stiffly with a thud. At this moment, Zi Xiecheng gently closed her left hand and clenched it. With a snap, the golden saber light was crushed by her in the air, and disappeared without a trace. The purple gold saber that also stayed in the air was also crushed at the same time, turning into golden powder and falling down. Zhixiang slowly retracted her palm. She looked up at Granduncle Han and asked lightly, "What did you say just now? I didn't hear it clearly." Granduncle Han stood there like a zombie. He stared dumbfoundedly at what happened in an instant just now. He only felt that his whole body was ice cold. A gush of hot blood almost rushed to his head, and he almost fainted from the rush. At this moment, Granduncle Han felt a chill run down his spine, and all the way to his buttocks. This kind of cultivation, this kind of immortal-like means, it was impossible for him to do it. Not only could he not do it, among all the people he knew, there seemed to be no one who could do it. And just now, he actually asked this woman to have a one-on-one fight? A fair fight. The rules of the martial world? Have I gone crazy? At this moment, when he heard Zhixiang's question, he felt relieved and hurriedly said, "Nothing, I didn't say anything." He thought to himself, "You didn't hear it clearly? That's great." Zhixiang smiled faintly, like the blooming of spring flowers. But at this moment, those who saw this beautiful smile no longer had any lewd thoughts in their hearts. They even forcefully turned their eyes to the side, not daring to look at her. Zhixiang looked around, and looked at the remaining 7 dumbfounded people. She ordered lightly, "The 7 of you come over. Stand in a row 30 feet in front of me. Hurry up, don't dawdle." The 7 of them were already scared out of their wits. How would they dare to disobey her now? One by one, they stood obediently behind 4th Jean, who was kneeling on the ground. The 7 experts were really more obedient than primary school students at this moment. Zhixiang looked at them and smiled calmly. "I'm not a law enforcement officer of the heavens, do you know that?" Everyone nodded. Zhixiang said lightly, "Although I'm not a law enforcement officer, I also like to judge. Especially, I like to judge villains. Do you understand?" Everyone nodded again. Zhixiang pointed at 4th Jean, who was kneeling on the ground, and said lightly, "This person actually sneaked an attack on me. Haha, in your opinion, what should he be punished for?" Everyone was dumbfounded and didn't dare to say anything. Granduncle Han stood at one side. His heart felt like it was being fried in oil. Endless feelings of humiliation surged into his heart. Today is Sister Zimoxian's birthday. I wish her a happy birthday. Every year, there will be a day like this. Qixi birthday, TSK, what a coincidence. I have to say that this birthday is really chosen. According to the ancient legends, those who were born on Qixi were all naturally affectionate and infatuated. I wonder which handsome guy will be able to gain the favor and infatuation of this little sister. Haha. Everyone, you can leave your blessings in the book review and comment section. Maybe Sister Zimoxian will be excited and touched. Thank you to Long Inua of the Alliance for his 4 blessings in the morning. Thank you to Tears of Bayan for his blessings. Thank you to Red Dust Stall for his blessings. Thank you to become the leader of the World Pride sect. Thank you everyone for your support. I will continue to explode today. I will celebrate Qixi with my explosiveness. Please vote. Chapter 923. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Second update. Granduncle Han was full of bitterness and helplessness. Marshal Yin Yang, the other party, was judging his own people in front of him, and even wanted his subordinates to take the initiative to judge, point out the crimes and pronounce the charges. This was already the ultimate insult. And it was very obvious that this was done deliberately with the nature of endless humiliation. But he had no other choice. The other party's cultivation was much higher than his. Facing such a terrifying cultivation, he had no way to resist at all. Even if it was a humiliation, he could only accept it. Everyone looked at each other. What crime should he be charged with? How should this be explained? Zhixiang's face turned cold and she said slowly, "What I hate the most in my life is those who use their power to bully women. Today, I shall give a warning to this heavens." She said with a cold face, "This person is called 4th Jean. He usually commits all kinds of evil, indulges young ruffians, bullies women, men and women. His crimes are monstrous. I announce that he will be sentenced to death. Fourth Jean, who was kneeling on the ground, raised his head desperately and said hoarsely, What right do you have to convict me like this? You are also not a law enforcement officer. He was grabbed by Xiexing and was controlled like a puppet. He knelt on the ground and couldn't move at all. It was as if 10 mountains were pressing on his body at the same time. He couldn't even move a finger. Now that he heard that he was convicted, he instantly struggled desperately and actually raised his head. He knew that Xiexing wanted to use him as an example. Once the evidence was conclusive, he would really be sentenced to death. At the critical moment of life and death, how could he not struggle to survive? You are neither a law enforcement officer, nor the ruler of the heavens, nor the clan master of the Long clan. You can kill me, but why do you have to convict me before I die? You said that I commit all kinds of evil. What proof do you have? Fourth Jean roared fiercely. Xiexing looked at him majestically. I am neither a law enforcement officer, nor the ruler of the heavens, nor the clan master of the Long clan. You are right about all these. But the only thing you don't know is, when you are not as good as me, I am the ruler in front of you. Everything about you, including your life, is decided by me. As for putting a crime on you before killing you, that's because I'm willing to do so. As for the proof that you have committed all kinds of evil deeds, haha, Xiexing laughed. I have already convicted you. Even if I didn't, I still have proof. My words are proof. You have no regard for human life. Fourth Jean roared. Webb, I don't know how many people you've killed for your master all these years. I don't care if you've killed 1,000 or 10,000 people. It has nothing to do with me. But your master is a pervert. You can't break up a loving couple, Xiexing said coldly. When you go down to the netherworld, you must remember that although I'm not the ruler of this heavens, in this heavens, I am. It is the heavens. Fourth Jean groaned. This is hegemony. This is tyranny. You're being unreasonable. You're being unreasonable, Xiexing sneered. Reason? When have you ever seen us women being reasonable? Fourth Jean was speechless. The onlookers were also stunned. These words were truly too valiant. Even Xu Yang, who was far away, suddenly had goosebumps. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. Oh my God, I finally heard a woman speaking the truth today. Everyone was speechless. Xiexing said, The few of you, start to expose Fourth Jin's crimes now. I'll deal with whoever says the most complete. Everyone looked at each other. That Granduncle Han couldn't help but say, Your Excellency, although Fourth Jin has offended you, isn't your way of doing things a little too much? We're all comrades in the martial world. It's no big deal to kill someone. Why do you have to humiliate us like this? Seeing that he finally opened his mouth to plead for leniency, everyone's face was filled with excitement and hope. They all looked at him, their eyes full of pleading and trust. Xiexing turned to look at him and revealed a strange smile. She said slowly, You think that with your cultivation of first-grade supreme martial artist, you can always escape from me even if you can't defeat me. That's why you're fearless, right? You think that as a first-grade supreme martial artist, no matter where you speak, no matter who you're facing, I'll have to give you some face, right? You think that I'm a woman, and women are always soft-hearted. You only need to plead with good words, move with emotions and reason, and I'll give you a way out, right? Granduncle Han was stunned. Marshal Yin Yang's newest chapter. These words had truly struck a chord in his heart. He really thought so. Perhaps the seventh young master, and the rest would definitely die today. But with his supreme martial artist divine senses, he would definitely be able to protect himself. The reason why he still stayed here now was that he wanted to try his best to bring a few more people back. Of course, it would be even more perfect if he could save the seventh young master from this woman's underling. No matter how strong this person was, she was still a woman, and women were always soft-hearted. She might not really kill him. As long as he persuaded her with good words and a sincere attitude, there might still be hope. Moreover, he still had another fluke thought in his heart. If he really managed to save the seventh young master, then he could start to build a relationship with her from now on. Who knows, she might become a strong helper for the clan. How many people had once become friends after being enemies? This kind of thing was not uncommon. If he were to plead as a supreme martial artist, if this woman was more sensible, she would give him a way out. Just as he was thinking, he did not expect the other party to say out all the thoughts in his heart. He could not help but blush. He smiled and said, "Even if I really think so, it seems to be understandable. Haha, Miss is a refined person. Please be magnanimous and let them off. I can guarantee that after my master goes back, he will definitely turn over a new leaf and become a new man." Be magnanimous? Let them off. Xiexing frowned and murmured, "Yes, miss. Please be magnanimous and let them off this time." Granduncle Han saw that there seemed to be hope, and could not help but become more energetic. Xiexing frowned and looked at him, as if she was thinking about the feasibility. Granduncle Han was delighted. "Okay," Xiexing said, "then I'll be magnanimous this time." "Thank you." Granduncle Han laughed happily. Xiexing suddenly raised her hand and slapped hard on Granduncle Han's smiling face. She frowned and said, "Who allowed you to smile?" This slap was really crisp and clear, and it resounded through the whole place. This slap really came out of nowhere, and was even more unreasonable. Everyone was stunned. Just now, everything was still fine, as if there was a lot of room for negotiation. But in the blink of an eye, Granduncle Han received such a loud slap. Everyone felt as if they had seen thunder, and they were all dizzy from the thunder. This also works. Granduncle Han's face quickly turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then slowly swelled up. He looked at Xiexing in disbelief. His lips trembled, and his eyes were filled with grief and indignation, as well as disbelief. His fingers trembled. You. He really did not expect this. Even in his dreams, he did not expect this kind of thing to happen. This matter happened so suddenly that even a first-grade supreme martial artist like him couldn't dodge in time. Xiexing frowned. The next moment, slap. Another loud slap landed on Granduncle Han's face. Xiexing frowned and said, "What are you pointing at with your finger? Who allowed you to point?" This slap was still crisp and loud, and it was in the opposite direction. Granduncle Han still did not avoid it. As the saying goes, a slap in the opposite direction, a slap on the left side, a slap on the right side. The others were truly struck by heavenly lightning. At this moment, they were all like ducks that were scared silly. Everyone's face was filled with fear, despair, and even confusion. Oh my God, what's going on? Who in this generation had seen a supreme martial artist being slapped? And it was a slap in the opposite direction, back and forth. This first-grade supreme martial artist's face turned to the left with a slap, and then with another slap. It was slapped right again. This was really a fucking eye-opener. To be able to see a supreme martial artist being slapped, damn it. Even if they were to die today, it would be worth it. Their trip to this world was not in vain. Both sides of Granduncle Han's face suddenly turned into a monkey's buttocks and pig's cheeks, red and swollen, almost transparent. The next moment, Granduncle Han directly went mad with anger. As a supreme martial artist, in his more than 2,000 years of life, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? When had he ever been slapped? Even when he was learning martial arts, his teacher had never slapped him like this. Under the fury, Granduncle Han's rationality instantly collapsed. With a bang, the hair on his head directly stood up. He gritted his teeth and scolded, "Bitch! How dare you hit me?" Xiexing looked at him strangely. "How dare you? Haven't I already slapped you? Don't you feel it? Huh? How dare you scold me?" Granduncle Han gritted his teeth, as if he wanted to eat someone. He looked at her fiercely, his anger soaring to the sky. "How dare you hit me? How dare you hit me? How dare you hit me again? Do you dare to hit me again?" As he spoke, he approached her step by step. He looked ferocious and arrogant. He straightened his face and twisted his neck. His gaze was ferocious and indignant. Seeing that this guy actually approached her with his old face again, Xiexing did not hesitate at all this time, and raised her hand. Slap, slap, slap. More than a dozen slaps were thrown in a row, crisp and clear. As she slapped him, she said, "This trip out of the Black Blood Forest has really opened my eyes. There's actually such a bitch in this world." After being slapped, You actually want me to slap you again? Since you're so eager, I'll just slap you to my heart's content. And as Zi Xiecheng slapped him, she asked, Are you satisfied? Do you want more? The sounds of slapping rang continuously. Everyone was instantly shocked. What the hell is going on? Why isn't Supreme Han fighting back? Just as they were thinking about this, they heard a heart-wrenching roar. Ah, bitch, I'm going to kill you. Ah, he roared, but his voice was a little strange. It turned out that he was being beaten as he roared. When he roared at the end, his voice was trembling because of the slaps. That single ah was actually slapped to several different rhythms. It sounded like the rhythm of his voice was undulating and undulating. If you're satisfied, please vote for me. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 924. Granduncle Han felt extremely strange, because he was rushing forward ferociously, wanting to fight with his life on the line. Now, he could only wash away his humiliation by fighting. No matter if he won or lost. His chest was about to explode from anger. But no matter how he rushed, he was still running in circles on the spot, even though he clearly felt that his speed was as fast as the wind. Zi Xiecheng was just standing there close to him, but he felt that she was far away from him. No matter how he rushed, he couldn't reach her. But the other party's slaps on his face were like a storm. The sounds of slaps mixed together into a pleasant sound, which actually had the rhythm of music. Granduncle Han rushed for a long time, and his face had been slapped countless times. Finally, he came to his senses. Could this be the legendary 10,000 miles in an inch? This was a secret technique of heaven and earth that only a mid-stage supreme martial artist could comprehend. The so-called 10,000 miles in 1 inch space was the use of a godly technique to create a unique domain. No matter what your cultivation was, as long as you were trapped in this domain, then even if you ran for a lifetime, you might not be able to escape from this 10,000 miles in 1 inch space. Within the 10,000 miles in an inch, one could usually travel a long distance with a single step. But once this realm was displayed, even if you ran for 10,000 miles, you could only run in circles on the spot. Granduncle Han broke out in a cold sweat, and his mind also became clear. He screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood. Suddenly, he turned around and was about to escape. He had already lost today. If this continued, not only would the 7th young master and the rest die, but he would also die here. Thinking of this, he immediately ran for his life. He turned around, but he forgot that he was still within the domain of the 10,000 miles in an inch. Therefore, even though he turned around and ran, he still stopped there without moving. Zi Xiecheng frowned. What? Have you had enough fun in the front? Now you want to change to the back? All right, then I'll fulfill your wish. She lifted her leg and kicked him like a storm. In the eyes of the onlookers, this Granduncle Han was holding his face up and getting beaten up. But he was still not satisfied. He even turned around and raised his buttocks to receive the other party's huge kicks. So everyone fainted. We've been with Supreme Martial Artist Han for so many years, but we've never heard of him having such a bad habit. What's going on? It was impossible for someone to be addicted to being beaten up, right? This was too ridiculous. However, Zi Xiecheng gave a reasonable explanation. You don't look young anymore. More than 1,000 years old? 1,800 years old, right? No one has beaten you up for so many years. Do you feel uncomfortable? Now that you've been beaten up by me, have you found the right feeling? You found that this feeling was so fresh and unforgettable. So you made me hit you again and again. Have you had enough? If you're done, then get out. I'm tired from kicking you, Zi Xiecheng said. As he spoke, his feet were merciless. The pitiful supremacy Han wanted to go out. But how could he? He could only stand up and take the kick while shouting and cursing in grief. His previous demeanor had long since disappeared. Everyone's eyebrows twitched as they watched. It was too bloody. A dignified supreme martial artist was beaten into a bloody pulp just like that. Moreover, he didn't even fight back. Today's matter was really strange. Moreover, as Zi Xiecheng beat up supreme martial artist Han, she controlled 4th Jin and Lan Ruoyan at the same time, and monitored the other 7 people to prevent them from escaping. She could be said to be multitasking. Moreover, her divine senses were still far away, paying attention to the situation of Wei Wuyan and his disciple. Finally, Supreme Martial Artist Han's cursing gradually weakened. Zi Xiecheng kicked him into the air and punched him in the chest. With a bang, Supreme Martial Artist Han flew far away. He twitched twice on the ground and lost consciousness. Zi Xiecheng had already scattered his cultivation. Chu Yang, who was at the side, knew that this meant that she had played enough. She didn't want to drag on any longer. He looked at the others coldly. You guys don't have any other hopes, right? The 7 of them nodded repeatedly, their faces full of fear. They couldn't beat her. They couldn't escape. Even a dignified supreme martial artist had ended up in such a state. Who else would dare to cause trouble? Zi Xiecheng ordered. As for 4th Jin, execute him now. The 7 of you are in charge of executing him. You, the 2 of you execute him. You supervise the execution. You, the 4 of you observe the execution. 315 cuts, a piece of flesh with each cut. If he dies after 315 cuts, the 7 of you will be executed together. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. The 7 of them were instantly dumbfounded. Isn't this too vicious? Chu Yang was a little impatient. This big sister had stayed in the Black Blood Forest for too long. It seemed that she was too lonely. She actually dilly-dallied for so long just to catch these few bad guys. He said lazily, forget it, don't torment them. Quickly execute them. Let's hurry on with our journey. Zi Xiecheng looked back and smiled. She said, I didn't want to torment them. Just like what they said, it's no big deal to kill them. However, I have never tolerated those who bully men and tyrannize women. I must use the cruelest means to torture them to death. Even if it's reincarnation, I must make them not dare to be evil. Chu Yang sighed deeply. Chu Luo clenched her fists and said, Sister Zi, I support you. Although Chu Luo was young, she also understood how harmful such people were to women. She had always hated them. Zi Xiecheng said lightly, Chu Yang, you're a man. You'll never know how much women hate such people who kidnap women. How many women's happiness was destroyed in their hands. Not only do they kidnap people, in order to prevent future troubles, they often eliminate the source of trouble. They let this family of innocent people die an unnatural death, just because the woman is beautiful. But can it be a woman's fault if she's beautiful? Having a beautiful face is a gift from the heavens. But because of these scumbags, it became the root of the destruction of her family. Zi Xiecheng said lightly. So when I see such people, I must kill them. Killing one of these people can save countless women, including their family members. Chu Yang was suddenly enlightened. So you purposely followed me with your real appearance to lure these perverts out one by one and kill them one by one? Zi Xiecheng smiled and nodded. Chu Yang, don't think that this is committing a sin by killing people. Those who have evil thoughts because of my appearance all deserve to die. You're enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens by killing them. This is not only not a sin, but also an endless merit. The more people you kill, the more women will have happy families because of you. Do you understand? Chu Yang was silent for a long time. Then he let out a long breath. I understand. This may be the redemption of conscience. It also weakens the inner demons to a certain extent. Because I'll feel that I've done a good thing. My heart will naturally be open and aboveboard, and I won't fear the heavens and earth. Zi Xiecheng's eyes were full of admiration. Yes, this is a kind of spiritual cultivation. I didn't expect you to understand my meaning so quickly. Chu Yang smiled. Since this is the case, I'll enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Zi Xiecheng laughed. You still think that I'm too slow? Fine, I'll let you handle it. As she said, she moved quickly. With a few slaps, all the Long Clan's experts were hit by her palm. This slap broke their bones and destroyed their cultivation. Chu Yang went forward with his sword. One slash, and killed all these people cleanly. If he let Zi Xiecheng do it, it would take a long time. Chu Yang didn't want to wait. With one slash, 4th Jin's eyes were full of despair, and he slowly fell to the ground. After this slash, his body actually shrank slowly and became a pile of white bones, which then dissipated with the wind. Calamity sword, devouring the energy of living beings. These people were definitely going to die, and there were no outsiders here. Besides, the weakest of these people were monarchs. And there was even a supreme martial artist here. To the Calamity Sword, this was a huge amount of spiritual energy. It would be a pity to waste it. So, Chu Yang used the devouring power of the Calamity Sword without any hesitation. He devoured all the life essence of these experts and turned it into nutrients for the Calamity Sword. Zi Xiecheng frowned slightly. She looked at the corpses turning into white ashes under Chu Yang's sword. She seemed to be deep in thought. When the sword pierced into Supreme Martial Artist Han's throat, Chu Yang sighed slightly. So what if he was a first-grade Supreme Martial Artist, after 2,000 years of cultivation? With one slash of his sword, everything turned into nothingness. It was as if he had never existed in this world. Everything was like the wind. The last one to be killed was of course Lan Ruoyan. Lan Ruoyan had already turned into a pile of mud, without Zi Xiecheng destroying his cultivation. When he saw Chu Yang coming over, he repeatedly shouted, "You! Don't come over, don't kill me. I'm the 7th master of the Lan clan, you. If you kill me, the Lan clan won't let you off. I beg you, spare my life." In the end, he actually shouted loudly for help. Chu Yang frowned. He was very surprised. Which one of the princes of the big clans that he had seen wasn't scheming and didn't show their emotions on their faces? Yishi, Libati and Mengse. What kind of outstanding characters were they? Only such characters were fit to be called the princes of the big clans. But why was this Lan Ruoyan of the Lan clan so gutless? Such a cowardly person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. How did he become the 7th master of the Lan clan? Are you fit to be the master of a big clan? Chu Yang looked at him with disgust. Looking at you, I'm really disappointed in this big clan. Lan Ruoyan cried and said, "How would I know? Since I was born, I've been designated as the 7th master of the Lan clan. I don't have the final say in this matter." Chu Yang looked at him coldly. "How old are you?" "I'm 27. Lan Ruoyan looked at him timidly. "How many girls have you defiled all these years? Tell me the truth." Chu Yang glared and shouted. Lan Ruoyan's mind was subconsciously controlled. He said as if he was sleep-talking, "I really can't remember clearly. About 200 to 300. As he said, he actually revealed an expression of reminiscence. He actually laughed and said, "What I like the most is to snatch beautiful girls and do it in front of their husbands." Before he finished speaking, Chu Yang had already exploded because of this sentence of his. A surge of anger instantly rushed to his head. He shouted, "Bastard!" His long sword slashed down fiercely. Chapter 925. Chu Yang now really felt that, as Zi Xiecheng said, it was too easy to kill such a scumbag. He should really let such a person suffer the cruelest torture in the world before he died. Only then would he be considered to have deserved it. Even so, it would only relieve a little of his hatred. Lan Ruoyan's mind was controlled by Chu Yang. Whatever he said under such circumstances was definitely the truth. And it was definitely the most straightforward reaction in his heart. So obscene, so shameless. Looking at this obscene smile, Chu Yang's heart was filled with fury. He slashed down with his sword. Starting from his feet, Lan Ruoyan rolled around on the ground and screamed miserably incessantly. "I will kill your father, your mother, your ancestors, and everyone who is protecting you. I will kill them one by one." Chu Yang roared. "Your whole family is scum, scum, scum. What kind of clan was a big clan? What kind of people were in it? They were all experts with powerful divine senses. How could Lan Ruoyan's family not know that he had done such a heinous thing? How could his parents not know? How could his old ancestors not know? Chu Yang would never believe it. Even if he said that the other higher-ups of the Lan clan didn't know about this, no one in the entire heavens would believe him. It was too ridiculous. Since they knew about it, they didn't stop it, and even let such an obscene person be the 7th Duke. It was obvious what kind of attitude the Lan clan had. At this moment, Chu Yang had already made a vow in his heart. No matter what other clans do, I will definitely exterminate the Lan clan. When he made this decision, he didn't even consider that Lan Meisien of the Lan clan was his mother's teacher. Lan Ruoyan's moans gradually weakened. Chu Yang raised his sword and was about to end his life. "Wait!" Zi Xiecheng stopped him. "What?" Chu Yang turned back and asked. "You can't kill him." Zi Xiecheng frowned. and looked at the black line that gradually appeared between Lan Ruoyan's eyebrows. She said seriously, "If you kill him, you will be in big trouble and your identity will be exposed." "Why?" Chu Yang asked curiously. "There's no one around here, so what if I kill him? No one will know." "Look at his forehead. That black line is very strange. As far as I know, this black line is a kind of supreme divine sense. The person who cares about this person the most has spent a lot of effort to plant a root in his body, using the power of his divine sense. If he dies, this black line will appear on the face of the person who killed him, at the same place between the eyebrows. Moreover, the supreme martial artist who left behind this will know immediately." Zi Xieching said, "This is the secret technique of the heavens. Double soul connection, one heart for 10,000 miles. Looks like this little one's identity isn't simple." Chu Yang snorted coldly. "So what if it's troublesome? Could it be that he spared this bastard's life because he was afraid of trouble? This is impossible." Zi Xieching blinked her eyes. "Carry him and follow me. Don't let him die. Let's find Wei Wuyan while we're at it." Chu Yang didn't know what he was up to. He could only grab Lan Ruoyan and follow him. Zi Xieching carried Chu Lo on her back and led the way in front. Chu Yang followed all the way. When they came to the outside of a forest, Zi Xieching let out a strange long howl. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the forest. Not long after, a large pack of greenback wolves swarmed in. "Throw him in." Zi Xieching twisted her mouth. "Haha, I see. This is a good idea. Let that supreme martial artist come and find trouble with these wolves." Chu Yang laughed loudly. He grabbed Lan Ruoyan and threw him out into the pack of wolves. When the pack of wolves smelled the blood, they howled and rushed up. Lan Ruoyan only had time to let out a scream before he was dismembered by the pack of wolves. A black line rose from Lan Ruoyan's corpse and wedged itself into the head of the wolf at lightning speed. That wolf seemed to be very uncomfortable. It actually turned around dizzily and ran away with the pack of wolves with its tail between its legs. Chu Yang said with some regret, "It's a pity that there are no powerful 10th or 11th grade spirit beasts nearby. Otherwise, after throwing them in, they can create some trouble for the Lan clan." Zi Xieching said, "Powerful spirit beasts. Originally, there was a human-faced spider here, but it was too disgusting for me to take, so I chased it away." Chu Yang laughed dryly. "Now the inner core and poisonous pill of that human-faced spider are with me. Killed by you?" Zi Xieching's gaze was very strange. "No, it's Wei Wuyan." As Chu Yang said, he explained the situation at that time. Zi Xieching actually laughed. "Your luck is really not bad." The two of them walked quickly. This time, they carefully avoided the people who were searching the mountain and went straight to the place where Wei Wuyan and his disciple were hiding. Because the people who were searching the mountain were getting closer and closer to that place. If they were delayed any longer, Wei Wuyan and his disciple might really die. After walking a few hundred feet forward, there was a cliff in front of them. Zi Xieching stopped, pointed to the opposite side of the cliff and said, "Wei Wuyan and his disciple are over there. That side is full of vines, and the entire cave entrance is blocked. It's hard to see with the naked eye here." Chu Yang sighed. Old Wei's generation is really not having it easy. Zi Xieching was silent for a while and said, "His master is indeed irresponsible, but Wei Wuyan is a rare good man. But he's too pedantic. Such a person will suffer a lot in the martial world." Chu Yang nodded in agreement. The two of them were about to go down when they suddenly heard rapid sounds coming from afar. It seemed that many people were rushing towards this place. The two of them bent down at the same time and quickly moved sideways. They flashed out of the path and the cliff and hid in the grass that was more than 10 feet high. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. People were constantly flying towards this place. Not long after, there were already close to 30 people. With a few swoosh sounds, 4 figures leaped onto a big tree and stood at the top of the tree to be on guard. A clanging sound was heard, followed by the fragrance of tea. The two of them were talking and laughing as they walked towards this place. These two people really knew how to enjoy themselves. They were actually making tea in this wilderness. A smiling voice asked very softly, "Brother Yi, did you discover anything on your side?" Once this person spoke, his voice, tone and the confidence and magnanimity of everything being under his control reminded Chu Yang of Wu Qingru. Then another flirtatious voice sounded. Oh, how annoying. Hee. Brother Zhuge, if you didn't discover anything on your side, how would I discover anything on my side? Hee. The hair on Chu Yang's body stood on end as this voice resounded. Then, an image of a laughing woman appeared in his mind. The third Duke of the Yi clan. The Duke of Rochang Yi Shiyu. So it was this transvestite who had come. The person from the Yi clan was actually the Duke of Rochang, one of the three dukes. What conditions did that Lang Yilong promise to make the Yi clan send out such an important person? Seeing Chu Yang's strange expression, Zi Xiecheng asked via telepathy, You know this person? This is the third Duke of the Yi clan, the Duke of Rochang, Yi Shiyu. Chu Yang replied via telepathy. This is really going to kill me. Zi Xiecheng silently rolled up half of her sleeves. She said via telepathy, Look. Chu Yang looked over and saw a dense layer of goosebumps on Zi Xiecheng's snow-white arms. For a moment, he almost laughed out loud. This is too disgusting. This should be a man, right? Zi Xiecheng frowned. Chu Yang could even clearly see that the hair on Zi Xiecheng's neck had stood up. This was enough to show how much of a shock this Duke Yi Shiyu had given her. Chu Yang laughed secretly in his heart. For Yi Shiyu to be able to scare someone of Zi Xiecheng's cultivation to such an extent, it was enough to show how powerful his charm was. No one in the heavenly layer could compare to him. If Yi Shiyu knew about this, he would definitely be very proud. That Duke Zhuge, on the other hand, was very calm. He smiled lightly and said, I really didn't expect that this search for supreme martial artist Icy Snow would actually be so troublesome, even though we had already obtained accurate information. Brother Yi, these days you've been eating and sleeping in the open. Your beautiful face has now become somewhat haggard. Hoo. I'm so annoying. You're so annoying Zhuge. I hate it when people bring up this issue, but you just have to keep talking about it. I hate you so much, Humph. Yi Shiyu pouted. He twisted his waist, tilted his buttocks, and sat facing the outside. Then, he took out a small mirror from his bosom and looked at his haggard face in the mirror. He sighed bitterly. What should I do? What should I do? I'm really haggard. My pitiful countenance. Boo-hoo, I really shouldn't have come out this time. Those guys just had to send me, Humph. Next time, I won't listen to them. Whoever wants to come out can come out. Sigh, my pitiful countenance. As he said, he took out a box of flour from his bosom. There was even a comb, face powder, eyebrow pencil and meticulously touched up his makeup. Zhuge smiled faintly. Brother Yi, you're really vain. This guy's voice was calm and elegant. He was not surprised by Yi Shiyu's unusual actions. It could be seen that his composure and self-cultivation were outstanding. Yi Shiyu twisted his waist like a snake and said shyly, Ayaya, us girls are different from you guys. Humph, how can we not be vain? As he said, he sighed faintly. I'm so tired, so tired. Humph, Zhuge, can you help me massage my shoulders? Can you? Zhuge smiled bitterly. Brother Yi, please spare me. You know that I'm a clean freak. Yi Shiyu instantly pouted and stomped his feet. What do you mean you're a clean freak? Am I very dirty? Am I very dirty? Zhuge, tell me. Tell me. Tell me, tell me, tell me. If you don't tell me clearly today, I'll crawl into your bed tonight. He stomped his feet, twisted his waist and shook his buttocks. He was very active. Zhuge could still face him calmly, but Chu Yang, who was in the bushes, was about to faint. What a monster! What a monster! How can there be such a weirdo in the world? It's really unbearable. Chu Yang really did not know how Zhuge could hold himself back. Chu Yang praised in his heart. People from the Zhuge clan are indeed different from others. He's so small and calm. He's almost as good as Wu Qingru. Chapter 926. I can't take it anymore. Zi Xiecheng secretly transmitted her voice. Her beautiful face actually turned pale. Every time I hear this voice, my whole body trembles. My scalp tightens, wrinkles and goes numb. This powerful person who had traversed tens of planes had a look of lingering fear. I've been wandering for tens of thousands of years. I've never been afraid of anyone. But this Duke Rochang really makes me feel fearful from the bottom of my heart. He can kill a supreme martial artist with just his mouth. Disgusting. Zhuge smiled gently and said, Brother Yi, let's talk about serious matters. Yi Shiyu twisted his waist and pouted. Zhuge finally shuddered and his lips turned green. Brother Yi, if you continue to be like this, I won't say anything. Yi Shiyu obviously didn't care. He raised his face and said with a hidden bitterness, But are you really going to turn a blind eye to my feelings for you? Zhuge gritted his teeth and finally couldn't take it anymore. He used a voice that was so gentle that it could kill people to say, Brother Yi, how can I not know your feelings for me? It's just that I'm in the secular world. How can I not care about what others think of me? And you and I are both brothers of big clans. But since you've said so, I'll also express my opinion. How about this? If you can convince the Yi clan, I'll marry you. As the saying goes, 3 flat pieces are not as round as 1 round, haha. This time, it was Yi Shiyu who couldn't take it anymore. All the hair on his body stood up, and he jumped up. He gritted his teeth and said, Scram. You pervert. This was a loud scolding, but it was a man's voice. Zhuge laughed out loud, almost to the point of tears. You pervert. You use such means to make fun of others every day. Today, I'll let you have a taste of it. Yi Shiyu looked at him angrily for a long time. Finally he burst out laughing. He sat back down. Zi Xiecheng, Chu Yang and Chu Luer, who were in the grass, were completely speechless. If not for the fact that the two of them finally started to talk about serious matters, the 3 of them would have fainted. At the same time, Chu Yang was also full of admiration in his heart. Zhuge Zhen is indeed worthy of being a person from a clan of wise men. This move of giving others a taste of their own medicine is extremely beautiful. Even a thick-skinned person like Yi Shiyu felt his hair stand on end, and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. It seemed like a joke, but it was actually a confrontation between the 2 dukes of the 2 great clans. Yi Shiyu was currently in a disadvantageous position. This was because his best disgusting method had been countered by an even more disgusting method. Chu Yang thought to himself, I wonder what rank this Zhuge is in the Zhuge clan? If such a person was not ranked first in the Zhuge clan, then how scheming was the first duke of the Zhuge clan? How terrifying was that? Chu Yang thought again. How is this Zhuge Liang compared to Diwu Qingro? After thinking about it, he still felt that Zhuge was slightly inferior. This was because Diwu Qingro's expression would never change no matter what. As for Zhuge Liang, no matter if it was because of his method, or because he couldn't control it, his expression would always change. Zhuge said, Brother Yi, law enforcement master Lang has been chasing after Hong Wuliang for hundreds of years. This time, he obviously received accurate news that Hong Wuliang is here. But, why didn't he do it himself? Or let the people from the interrogation hall do it? Instead, he wants to borrow the power of the 3 great clans. What do you think? Yi Shiyu's eyebrows twitched. He said faintly, It must be because the law enforcement master of the interrogation hall has something on those old fellows in the clans. That's why they have no choice but to do things for him? Of course. Zhuge rolled his eyes and said, Of course it's because he has something on them. But everyone knows about the feud between Lang Yilang and Hong Wuliang. This time he didn't do it himself. This matter is too suspicious. I'm talking about Lang Yilang's motive, not the reason why he instigated us. A rare frown appeared on Yi Shiyu's face. He pondered deeply and said, There are indeed many things that the law enforcement masters can use against us big clans. But it's always been like this for generations. Although the law enforcement masters are powerful, they may not be able to completely suppress the big clans. But this time, the elders immediately agreed to Lang Yilang's suggestion. This in itself is very suspicious. Zhuge nodded. That's right. As for Lang Yilang not doing it himself, it's definitely not because he's embarrassed. Yi Shiyu analyzed calmly. Of course. Zhuge didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lang Yilang caused a huge commotion at Hong Wuliang's wife's funeral back then. The 2 of them are enemies. Zhuge analyzed calmly. Later on, Lang Yilang killed Hong Wuliang's friends wantonly. The 2 of them met on the battlefield and became sworn enemies. Regardless of whether it's Lang Yilang or Hong Wuliang, as long as they received news of the other party, they would immediately rush over. Their lifelong ambition is to kill the other party personally. But this time, even though Hong Wuliang's whereabouts are known, Lang Yilong didn't do it. Zhuge said, "There must be a conspiracy behind this." Yi Shiyu was stunned. "It can't be that sinister, right? Your Zhuge clan always likes to associate everything with conspiracies. I really can't stand you guys," Zhuge said. "I think there are two possibilities why Lang Yilong didn't do it. The first possibility is that after so many years of disappearance, Hong Wuliang's cultivation is no longer what it used to be." Lang Yilong had already come to look for Hong Wuliang, but left after suffering a huge loss. "That's why we were mobilized." Frowning, Yi Shiyu didn't speak. After a long while he said, "That can't be." Zhuge was also silent for a moment before he said, "The first possibility is also the most unlikely. As for the second possibility, it's that Lang Yilong is at a critical juncture now. He can't split himself." Yi Shiyu put away his feminine demeanor. His eyes lit up, and he lowered his voice. "You're saying he's about to advance to third-grade supreme martial artist? And he's currently breaking through the bottleneck?" Zhuge looked at him strangely and smiled. "Brother Yi, are you testing me?" Yi Shiyu blinked his eyes and laughed. Zhuge snorted and said, "Lang Yilong was already a third-grade supreme martial artist 270 years ago. Although this is top secret, I know what you mean the moment you ask. Brother Yi, you actually dared to speak like this in front of the Zhuge clan. I really admire your narrow-mindedness." Having his thoughts exposed, Yi Shiyu instantly reverted to his old ways. He stomped his feet in embarrassment, twisted his waist, and winked at Zhuge. "You're so annoying," Zhuge snickered. Both dukes had their own thoughts. Even though it was a conversation like this, they were both scheming. They were both digging holes for each other. Yi Shiyu deliberately said third grade. If the Zhuge clan didn't know, Zhuge would naturally report this news back. In that case, the Zhuge clan's analysis of Lang Yilong would be greatly discounted. If there were any changes in the future, the Zhuge clan would suffer heavy losses because of this misjudgment. At the very least, it would affect one party's plan. And Zhuge's subsequent pointing out was equivalent to spoiling another one of Yi Shiyu's schemes. The one who was truly at a loss now was Yi Shiyu, because according to Zhuge's analysis, Lang Yilong might be breaking through to fourth-grade supreme martial artist. This piece of news was of utmost importance to the big clans. But was this piece of news true or false? Should they report it or not? If they reported it, what if it was false? If they didn't report it, what if it was true? If they took it seriously and adjusted their plans to deal with Lang Yilong, then they might end up doing something like shooting a stone at a mosquito. It would be a waste of energy, and this would lead to the weakening of their strength in other areas. Fourth-grade supreme martial artist. How could those who paid attention to him be mediocre? The two dukes each had their own schemes. On the surface, they appeared to be harmonious, but deep down, they were at loggerheads and plotting against each other. Because everyone knew that the 10,000-year cycle of reincarnation was coming. Once the Tribulation Sword Master appeared, the law enforcement officers would still be biased towards him, even though they appeared to be fair on the surface. Once the Tribulation Sword Master appeared, it meant that the honeymoon period between the big clans and the law enforcement officers had come to an end. Even if there was a huge battle, it wasn't impossible. Every 10,000-year cycle of reincarnation, there would be a huge battle between the big clans and the law enforcement officers. How could they not guard against such a thing? Moreover, it had already been more than 1,000 years. Where's that bastard? Yi Shiyu couldn't figure out what was going on, so he could only change the topic. As he spoke, he revealed an undisguised look of disgust. "That bastard is flirting with women," Zhuge snorted and said. "Then, when I used the heaven and earth magical hearing to detect the movements within a radius of a few hundred miles, I happened to hear that bastard talking." "What was he talking about?" Yi Shiyu asked with great interest. Zhuge took out a strange-shaped metal ear-like thing and said, "Activating the heaven and earth magical hearing once consumes too much energy. I only heard a few sentences, and then I heard Lonroyan say, 'Miss, why don't we fight? Let them all leave. Do you want to fight on the bed? Or should we fight here? Or in the water? Or on the tree?' Zhuge actually imitated Lan Ruoyan's voice to perfection. Even the lust in his voice was imitated in its original way. Now that bastard is probably doing that fighting, Zhuge said disdainfully. Yi Shi was furious. That bastard is flirting with our weak women again. What else did he say? Do you know how much energy it consumes for me to activate the heaven and earth magical hearing? Just hearing a few sentences already disgusted me, Zhuge said angrily. Do you think that I'm using the heaven and earth magical hearing to listen to the bed? Yi Shi was also furious. That bastard is flirting with beautiful women, and you actually didn't do anything when you heard it? You let him do whatever he wants and cause great physical and mental harm to us weak women? Zhuge snorted. I want to do something, but didn't your clan warn you this time? Don't offend Lan Ruoyan? Don't you know who's behind him? Yi Shi was still angry. But I feel angry when I hear such words, as if he's raping me. Raping you? He's raping you. Zhuge finally spat out a mouthful of tea, and coughed continuously. Chapter 927. After scolding for a while, Yi Shiyu also became dejected. I feel disgusted when I see that bastard Lan Ruoyan. But the old monster behind that bastard is indeed not easy to deal with. He sighed and said, Didn't this bastard's legs get broken by Mengsei previously? How did he recover so quickly? How depressing. Zhuge smiled and said, The last time this fellow tried to kidnap a girl, Mengsei encountered him. After learning of his identity, he still broke his legs. However, because of these 2 legs, the family paid a price of 10,000 purple crystals. Mengsei was also grounded by the family, and is not allowed to leave. Yi Shiyu said with a face full of reverie, Mengsei, he's a real man. Such a man is a good match for us girls. The corner of Zhuge's mouth twitched. Chu Yang and Zi Xieching exchanged glances. It turned out that this Lan Ruoyan had a big backer behind him? No wonder he could be the 7th Duke of the Lan clan. Yi Shiyu said with great interest, Brother Zhuge, that old monster is already 1,000 years old. Why does he treasure this bastard Lan Ruoyan so much? Zhuge looked at him strangely. You don't know? Yi Shiyu was startled. What do I know? Zhuge smiled strangely and looked left and right. Then he moved his mouth closer and said in a low voice, I heard. Remember, it's only hearsay. That old monster's yin and yang were disrupted more than 20 years ago, and he almost went mad. He rushed out from his seclusion and raped Lan Ruoyan's mother. Who would have thought that with one shot, Lan Ruoyan was born? Say this old thing has never been married his whole life, and he actually has a child at 1,000 years old. How much does he treasure this child? Yi Shiyu opened his mouth wide and his eyes were full of shock. His voice trembled as he said, He. He's already 1,000 years old and his spear skills are still so accurate. Keep quiet. Zhuge shouted. Too shocking. I'm so shocked. Yi Shiyu patted his chest with one hand, and looked as if he was still in shock. Damn it. He's too strong. He's so old and he's still so good. This kind of person is definitely a good match for us girls. Not only was he too shocked, Chu Yang and Zi Xieching in the bushes were also too shocked. The 2 of them were so shocked that they almost lost their ability to speak. There was actually such a thing. No wonder this Lan Ruoyan was so unbridled. It turned out that he had a father who was 7,000 years old. Then, Chu Yang thought of the twin soul connection. One heart for 10,000 miles on Lan Ruoyan. He knew how much his supreme martial artist father treasured him. No wonder fortunately he didn't kill him. If that was the case, he would let his 7,000-year-old father go, and settle the score with that pack of wolves. Thinking of this, Chu Yang immediately took pleasure in his misfortune. Right at this moment, someone hurriedly came over to report. Third young master, we found the cave where Hong Wuliang is hiding. It's just below this cliff close to the middle. Yi Shiyu and Zhuge were both stunned. Neither of them moved. Zhuge chuckled and said, Brother Yi, this is a good opportunity for your Yi clan to befriend law enforcement master Lang. Brother Yi, please give the order. I'll support you. Yi Shiyu laughed. How would I dare to steal Brother Zhuge's limelight? Brother Zhuge, it's better if you give the order. The sooner we understand this matter, the sooner we can return. This is the perfect opportunity for me to witness the Zhuge clan's ingenuity. Both of them knew that this battle was extremely dangerous. The other party was only one person, but he had the cultivation of a supreme martial artist. Although there were quite a number of people from their clans, and their strength was far greater than the other parties, it was absolutely impossible for them to take down the other party without paying a heavy price. At such a time, the price was usually a huge loss. Such a loss, of course, should be pushed away as much as possible. No, 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 you should do it. No, 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 you should do it. Both of them had a cordial smile on their faces, as if they were confiding in each other wholeheartedly. Both of them insisted on giving this great credit to the other party. After a long while, both of them sighed at the same time. It's a pity that Lan Ruoyan, that lecherous hothead, isn't here. Otherwise, we would have saved a lot of effort, Yi Shiyu said sadly. I don't know where that bastard has gone to, Zhuge agreed. Although the two of them were disgusted by Lan Ruoyan leading the team here, they also felt that it was actually not bad to have such a straightforward person in front of them, who would rush forward excitedly after being instigated a little. At least they could avoid their own losses. They didn't expect that at such a critical juncture, the people from the Lan clan actually went missing altogether. The two of them argued for a long time, and finally reached an agreement. Zhuge would be in command, and Yi Shiyu would be on the sidelines to assist. The people from the Yi clan and Zhuge clan would be under Zhuge's command, and they would be paired according to their strength. Such a battle was simply torture, but the two of them were very calculative. They weren't calculative about who would do the work, but they were calculative about how much strength they could preserve in the future battle. After making up their minds, Zhuge Yin immediately started to give out orders. This is a cliff, and we don't know how long it is on both sides, so there's definitely no exits on both sides. This cave is at the bottom of the cliff, and it's too high to go up a few thousand feet, so there's definitely no way out. If there's a way out, it must be at the back of the mountain. Third Elder, you bring a few people to the back of the mountain first. You must block all possible exits. Once you discover someone escaping from there, stop him immediately, and send out a signal immediately. Even if you have to risk your life, you can't let him escape. Zhuge Yin blocked the escape route of Wei Wuyan and his disciple. Yes. A man in blue cupped his hands and accepted the order. With a wave of his hand, he brought a few people with him, and left like a whirlwind. When you reach there, report back immediately when you're ready, Zhuge instructed. Yes. This third elder had already left without a trace. Brother Yi, send a few people. When I give the order, cut down all the vines on the mountain wall. Zhuge said. If there's such a thing, there's definitely a mechanism. We don't know the secret behind it, but Hong Wuliang definitely knows, and he can use it flexibly. Even if there's no mechanism, with these vines as stepping stones, he'll definitely be faster than us in this place, where he's lived for a long time. Cut it down first. Okay. Yi Shiyu agreed readily this time. He immediately arranged the manpower. The other party is in the cave, and we're not familiar with the terrain. It's easy to defend and hard to attack. And we don't know if there's a water source and how much food there is. So when the entrance of the cave is exposed, we'll first light a fire, roll up the thick smoke, mix it with poison, and pour it into the cave. Okay. Chu Yang, who was in the bushes, secretly praised, brilliant plan. Once we're sure that the thick smoke can fill the cave to the point that nothing can be seen, the few supreme martial artists elders will immediately rush into the cave. Now, you can use a black cloth to cover your eyes and adapt to the darkness in a dark place, Zhuge ordered decisively. Yes. Now, when we've confirmed that the third elder is in position, we'll immediately take action. Zhuge finished the arrangement and turned to look at Yi Shiyu. Brother Yi, do you have anything else to add? Yi Shiyu said with some admiration. Brother Zhuge, you're very capable. I admire you very much. This was his heartfelt words. Zhuge had really thought of all aspects. Blocking the escape route, assisting the enemy, using the thick smoke, poison together, knowing that the other party wouldn't be poisoned to the point of fainting. But he had successfully created a situation where both parties were on equal footing. Because of the smoke, both parties couldn't see anything. Although it was more dangerous to rush in and fight in such a situation, It had successfully offset part of the other party's geographical advantage, because the other party couldn't see anything. Using a black cloth to cover one's eyes to adapt to the darkness was even more ingenious. If it wasn't for this small thing, one would definitely feel uncomfortable rushing into the dark fog from a bright place. Although this uncomfortable feeling only lasted for a short moment, it was enough for a supreme martial artist to attack 1,000 times. What would it feel like to be attacked by 1,000 times at the same time? Chu Yang dared not underestimate this Zhuge more and more. If he were to have a conflict with the Zhuge clan in the future, he might become enemies with this person. When that time came, he had to deal with him carefully. Zi Xiecheng also cautiously transmitted a message to Chu Yang. This small thing, you have to be careful of his schemes. Chu Yang nodded silently. A strange bird's chirping sound came from afar, and it reverberated for a long time. Zhuge listened carefully and smiled. The third elder has already found the exit of the back mountain, and has sealed it. Let's take action immediately. Yi Shiyu nodded. With a twist of his buttocks, he waved his hand. Chop down those vines for me. Their figures soared up like big birds. Their black clothes seemed to cover the sunlight. With a neat flip in midair, the 4 figures transformed into 4 long rainbows that connected the heavens and the earth. These 4 people actually performed the supreme sword technique of body and sword at the same time, and dashed towards the stone wall. Chu Yang didn't know what the vines were made of, but he still had to be careful. If the vines were extremely hard and couldn't be chopped off with a sword, it would be a big problem. The people from the Zhuge clan also jumped down. As they flew, they wielded their swords and sabers. Countless big trees were chopped down. Then each of them carried a big tree as big as a hill and jumped down. When the vines fell, they would immediately set them on fire. The 3 supreme martial artists stood beside the 2 dukes with their hands behind their backs. Their eyes were covered with black cloth, and they were ready to attack at any time. The situation was tense, and a fight could break out at any moment. Yi Shiyu laughed tenderly and said, Brother Zhuge, let's go down too. It's too far away from here. I really want to see how Hong Wuliang, who defeated Lang Yilang in love 2,000 years ago, looks like. Zhuge smiled and nodded. With a whoosh, the 2 of them also jumped down the cliff. The 3 supreme martial artists followed closely. Finally, there was no one on this mountain wall. We should go down now. From what these people said, they don't know that Wei Wuyan's teacher has already practiced the purple crystal hand for hundreds of years. Once these people attack, they will definitely attack with all their might. I'm afraid it's too late. Chu Yang transmitted his voice. It's okay. Zi Xiecheng listened attentively to the movements below. She said lightly, Since you want to show kindness, you should do it at the most important moment. How to show kindness to others and let them remember it for life is also a kind of knowledge. You have to learn this. You acted when his life wasn't in danger. At most, you could only make him feel grateful to you, because he hadn't had the time to feel the horror of death. Therefore, his gratitude towards you wasn't very deep. However, you acted when his life was at stake. At that time, he would have died, and you would have become his second parent. Chapter 928. That's right, it's the 3 of us. The elder from the Zhuge clan said indifferently, Hong Wuliang, you've been holed up here for so many years that you've become dumb. Do you want to go out with us, or do you want us to carry you out? Hong Wuliang chuckled and said, Although I've been living in seclusion here, and haven't gone out for many years, I'm not someone the 3 of you can handle. However, I really didn't expect that the 3 of you would also become Lang Yilang's lackeys. He suddenly said in a low voice, What benefits did Lang Yilang promise you? Have both the Yi clan and the Zhuge clan been caught by Lang Yilang? This isn't a good feeling, right? Ha 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 ha. Yi Amren said indifferently, It's better to be caught by someone than to lose your life. Attack. With a loud roar, he charged forward with his body stretched out. The 3 of them attacked at the same time, forming a triangle and sandwiching Hong Wuliang. Hong Wuliang let out a loud shout and stretched out his hands. A pile of purple crystals at the side of the cave suddenly flew into his hands. He opened his mouth and took a deep breath. His skinny body suddenly swelled up, and a thick purple aura was swallowed into his stomach. There were more than 1,000 purple crystals in this pile, but they were all sucked clean by him in an instant. Hong Wuliang's face turned red at once. He shouted, "Let's fight!" He rushed forward and actually took the initiative to attack. The four of them attacked together. A figure flew over from the sky and jumped into the battle. It was Wei Wuyan. "If you want to kill my teacher, you'll have to kill me first." Wei Wuyan let out a loud shout and rushed over with all his might. Yi Amren snorted and shouted, "You actually dare to interfere in a battle between third-grade supreme martial artists?" With a slap of his palm, a sharp whistling sound was heard. A thick fog was accurately aimed at Wei Wuyan's Wuyan sword. With a loud bang, the palm and Wuyan sword faced each other. With a loud bang, Yi Amren didn't retreat at all. There wasn't even a red spot on his palm. But Wei Wuyan flew back with his sword and crashed heavily into the stone wall. Stones from the top of the cave fell down. With a cry, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wei Wuyan was a half-step supreme martial artist. But compared to a third-grade supreme martial artist, he was as weak as a baby. The difference between the ranks of supreme martial artists was so clear-cut. Hong Wuliang and the other two people had already started fighting. The three of them were holding back their strength, so as not to cause the mountain peak to collapse. However, the howling wind was like a hurricane in the cave. In an instant, there was no sound in their ears. Hong Wuliang's expression was calm, and he fought steadily. It was as if he didn't see his brother being sent flying. He was already seriously injured. Although his cultivation had increased a lot over the years, it was all thanks to the purple crystal's power. If he lost the purple crystal, he would not be able to escape the torture of the purple crystal hand, even if his cultivation improved by another fold. Yi Amren watched the battle with his hands behind his back. Seeing that he was not needed for the time being, he slowly walked to Wei Wuyan's side and asked, "Xiao, your teacher has the purple crystal hand? Who did it?" Wei Wuyan snorted and laughed. "Who is my master's biggest enemy?" Yi Amren's expression changed. "Lang Yilang." Wei Wuyan sneered. "It's good that you know." He didn't want to answer the other party's question at first, but upon hearing that the other party didn't seem to know the truth of this matter, and didn't even know that Lang Yilang had the purple crystal hand, therefore he was naturally happy to tell him. The purple crystal hand was one of the most insidious martial arts techniques in the world, even more insidious than the hand of severing descendants. The hand of severing descendants was only targeted at young people. Generally, when one reached the supreme martial artist level, they were all old monsters who had lived for thousands of years. How would they have any thoughts of continuing their lineage? Therefore, the experts weren't afraid of it. As for the purple crystal hand, it was used against experts. Unless you exceeded the supreme martial artist level and crossed the celestial realm, you could avoid it. Otherwise, even if you were a fifth-grade supreme martial artist, if you were ambushed by the purple crystal hand, you wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being accompanied by the purple crystal all day long. There would be a day when he would be bankrupt, losing both his wealth and his life. The most insidious thing about the purple crystal hand was that it wouldn't kill you on the spot. Moreover, the lifespan of an expert was very long. The purple crystal hand would accompany you for your entire life, causing you to be tortured by the purple crystal hand all the way until you died. It was one of the most insidious martial arts techniques that experts of the heavenly layer were most afraid of. As long as the Yi clan and the Zhuge clan knew about this, they would naturally be on guard against Lang Yilang. In fact, they might even secretly kill him. Although Wei Wuyan didn't understand why Lang Yilang actually didn't show up personally this time, and instead asked someone from a big clan to do it, it could be considered a bad move. As for what exactly his intentions were, he definitely wouldn't hide it for Lang Yilang. So Lang Yilang has practiced the purple crystal hand. No wonder, no wonder. Yi Amren's expression was grave as he nodded slowly. He didn't know what he was thinking about. He turned to look at the battlefield and said dispassionately, "How many years has it been since your master practiced the purple crystal hand?" Wei Wuyan replied, "He has been missing for as many years as he has. If it wasn't for the purple crystal hand, who would be willing to hide? Would you? You have a sharp tongue. Yi Amren smiled. In that case, all these years, it has been you who has been providing purple crystals to your master? That's right. As his younger brother, this is what I should do. Wei Wuyan said proudly. What a loyal and devoted disciple. Yi Amren laughed sarcastically. Your master must have told you that he needs a large amount of purple crystals after practicing the purple crystal hand. Every day, he needs purple crystals to maintain the lowest consumption, right? Wei Wuyan said furiously. Which one of those who has practiced the purple crystal hand isn't like this? Do I need you to tell me that? Yi Amren smiled strangely. Which one isn't like this? Then which one have you seen? Other than your master. Who else have you seen who has practiced the purple crystal hand? Wei Wuyan snorted. Even if I haven't, only purple crystals can treat the purple crystal hand. There is no doubt about this. That's right. You must have suffered a lot in order to get purple crystals for your master all these years, right? Yi Amren's expression was strange. Wei Wuyan snorted and didn't say anything else. Thinking of the suffering he had gone through all these years, how could it be described as a lot of suffering? Back then, his wife had just given birth and was taking care of the child at home. His master urgently needed him to deliver the purple crystals, so he had no choice but to leave his wife alone at home and deliver the purple crystals to his master first. But who would have thought that it would be an eternal farewell? When he hurried back after delivering the purple crystals to his master, his beloved wife had already become a cold corpse. Even his own son had died an unnatural death. Till now, he still didn't know who his enemy was. How could it be just a lot of suffering? For his master, he had sacrificed his family, his youth and all his life's efforts. But Wei Wuyan had hidden all these in his heart and never told anyone. At one side, Hong Wuliang shouted loudly, Yi Anren, what nonsense are you talking about? Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Don't harm my brother. As he shouted, he wanted to rush over. But the two supreme martial artists were firmly restraining him. Hong Wuliang couldn't rush over, and could only shout continuously. Yi Amren smiled mockingly and said, what a righteous master and a loyal brother. Ha ha ha. It's a pity that your loyal brother has been cheated and sold by your most respected and righteous master. Bullshit. Wei Wuyan was furious. His master's concern just now made Wei Wuyan tremble all over. In an instant, he only felt that all the suffering in his life was worth it. Seeing that Yi Anren actually wanted to slander his master, Wei Wuyan was instantly furious. Bullshit. Haha. Ask your master, he's right here. After getting the purple crystal hand, you can only maintain the minimum requirements, and your cultivation won't improve at all. But if you want your cultivation to continue to improve after getting the purple crystal hand, you must start to use double the amount of purple crystals from the first day you get the purple crystal hand. Do you understand? Double the amount of purple crystals. Yi Amren laughed loudly and said, your master got the purple crystal hand all these years, but we were of the same generation back then. We've reached such a realm now. But he, a person who got the purple crystal hand, has also reached such a realm. He's really damn fast. If he didn't use double the amount of purple crystals, how could he have improved? Wei Wuyan was shouting angrily, but when he heard this, he was suddenly dumbfounded. After a long time, he shouted crazily, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Yi Amren smiled and said, your master is right here. If you don't believe me, why don't you ask him directly? Wei Wuyan didn't believe him, but he couldn't help but look at his master. Hong Wuliang was fighting. His face was red and he said deeply, Wuyan, don't believe him. Don't you understand what kind of person I am? Wei Wuyan said blankly, yes, master. He had been with Hong Wuliang for more than 1,000 years. How could he not understand his master? As soon as Hong Wuliang said this, Wei Wuyan immediately knew that Yi Anren was telling the truth. If it wasn't true, Hong Wuliang would have already stomped his feet and roared angrily. But now, Hong Wuliang was explaining to him in such a heavy and serious tone. Explanation. Wei Wuyan only felt that his mind was buzzing. He suddenly remembered Chu Yang's words. With the purple crystal hand, one's cultivation can't improve. Of course, if Chu Yang didn't finish his sentence. However, Wei Wuyan finally understood. Why Chu Yang wanted to say something but hesitated at that time. Chu Yang was worried that if his master improved instead and told him the truth, he would be very sad. Wei Wuyan only felt that the world was spinning. He muttered, Then my wife. Didn't she die too unjustly? If that was really the case, wouldn't the purple crystals that he had earned all these years be enough to support his master for another 700 years? If that was really the case, why would he have to rush over to deliver the purple crystals and cause his beloved wife to die? You have a wife, son, dead? Yi Anren looked at him pitifully. Yes, Wei Wuyan said muddle-headedly. Then your wife and son didn't die unjustly at all. They deserve to die. Yi Anren laughed mockingly and said, Their existence will greatly slow down the speed at which you earn purple crystals for your master. If they don't deserve to die, who should? As if a bolt from the blue had struck his head, Wei Wuyan suddenly felt that the world had changed colors. Chapter 929. Wei Wuyan suddenly recalled that during that period of time, he indeed went out on fewer missions. How could he not be attached to his family when he had just gotten a wife? Moreover, it was after half a lifetime of hardships. When he was nearly 100 years old, he unintentionally saved a family. That was how he got his wife's favor and committed herself to him. Although he looked like he was in his prime at that time, he was indeed a white-haired and beautiful woman in terms of age. For his master, he had never thought of having a family. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until he was more than 100 years old. He only wanted to be an ox or a horse for the rest of his life, to repay his master's kindness in nurturing him. When he was old and took care of his master, he would be lonely. At that time, he was moved by true love and got married. However, he only dared to tell his wife's family that he was in his 40s. After marriage, the couple was in love. During that period of time, he was as happy as a fairy. After he had a wife and a family, he felt that he was no longer a rootless duckweed. He finally had a root, a concern, and a goal. After 3 years of marriage, he found love again. It was really like a pearl or a treasure. He only felt that there was no other person in the world who was happier than him at that time. He remembered that at that time, he almost rushed over to tell his master that he was going to get married. He was already more than 100 years old, but he was like a child showing off in front of his father, telling his master about his happiness. He had already forgotten what his master's expression was like at that time. However, it wasn't as happy as he expected. He only remembered that he was a little disappointed at that time. But then he was immersed in happiness. On the day of the wedding, he begged his master shamelessly for a long time before his master went down the mountain to preside over his wedding. After that, he hurried back. He still remembered that after he had a son, he rushed over to tell his master the good news. His master's face was a little ugly at that time. After marriage, he was happy, but he never dared to forget his master. Whenever he was free, he would do missions to earn purple crystals and send them to his master. However, because he was a newlywed, there were still a few times when he was almost delayed. But he didn't. That time, he received a notice from his master that there were no more purple crystals. So, he threw everything aside and sent the purple crystals first. Although his wife and son had died an unnatural death after he came back, he never doubted his master in his heart. He also never resented his master. What kind of person was his master? His master was the person who nurtured him. Without his master, how could he have today's achievements? His master would never do anything to harm him. Although master was strict and sometimes unreasonable, he was always alone here. It was normal for him to be in a bad mood. No one could stand being alone for so many years. Therefore, after he had nothing to worry about, he decided to stay here as well. Other than earning purple crystals from missions, he would accompany his master here. And now, he had actually heard such a terrifying truth. At the side, the battle between the three of them was getting more and more intense. Hong Wuoyang's face was like iron. He attacked left and right, and his eyes were calm and cold. The icy aura that belonged to the supreme of ice and snow lingered around his body. Although the entire cave was filled with smoke, it was also very cold. Wei Wuyan felt as if he was in a dream. Looking at his master who was moving around like lightning, he only felt that he had fallen into a nightmare that he could not wake up from. Everything he saw and heard seemed so unreal. Wei Wuyan's tears finally fell. At such a close distance, and Yi Amren had deliberately raised his voice. How could Hong Wuliang not hear him? Just a moment ago, he was still explaining, but now, he didn't even bother to explain. Master! Wei Wuyan cried out with heart-wrenching pain. The battle over there stopped abruptly. The two supreme martial artists of the Zhuge clan leaped back at the same time, and the three of them stood in a triangle formation. Hong Wuliang stood there in a daze. When he heard his disciple's heartbreaking cry, his body trembled, but he didn't turn back. He sighed and said, Wuyan, remember that I once told you that you must not have any thoughts of family. That's the taboo of the inner demons of martial arts cultivation. If you want to climb to the peak of martial arts, don't think about those things. Wei Wuyan's mind was buzzing, and he saw stars. He said weakly, That was before my marriage. After I got married, Master. You know how much I cherish and depend on my family. I like the feeling of having a family. As he spoke, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. Gentle and virtuous wife, lively and cute son. He still remembered that as long as he went out, his wife would always stand at the door to send him off. His return date was never fixed, but every time he returned, his wife would already be at the door to welcome him. You're going out? You must be more careful. With me at home, you can rest assured. Come back safe and sound. You're back? You must be tired from the journey. I'll go get some water for you to wash up. Take a nap and rest first. He still remembered when that little life was just born, lying in his arms, biting his finger and looking at him with a pair of clear eyes. That soft touch, that innocent gaze, that feeling of being connected by flesh and blood, conquered him in an instant. When he squealed and used his soft and chubby little hands that were full of fat pits to touch his face and smiled happily, he felt so satisfied and happy in his heart. He once swore that he would use his life and everything to protect his wife and his son. The oath was still beside his ears, but his lovely wife turned into a vengeful spirit. His wife lay stiffly on the ground, her face full of disbelief. She was already dead, but her eyes were still wide open in shock. Although her eyes were lifeless, he could see the shock in her eyes. His wife's eyes didn't even have time to show resentment and reluctance. Why? His lively and cute son had already turned into a pile of bright red meat paste. Who was so cruel? Even a baby was not spared. He remembered that he fainted on the spot. After a long time, he woke up and roared at the sky in extreme madness. From then on, besides carrying out missions to earn purple crystals, he went to the ends of the earth to look for his enemy. Ha ha ha. Looking for my enemy? Wei Wuyan suddenly laughed sadly. The four supreme martial artists looked at him. Wei Wuyan supported himself against the stone wall and stood up shakily. With his cultivation, even if he was seriously injured and his limbs were all broken, it wouldn't be so difficult for him to stand up. But now Wei Wuyan was like an extremely weak ordinary person who had one foot in the grave. He only felt that his limbs didn't have any strength, and his heart was empty. His heartbeat was obviously so fierce and wild. But when he listened to the sound of his own heartbeat, it was as if it came from another time and space. He finally stood up and supported himself against the stone wall. With blood flowing from the corners of his mouth, he staggered 2 steps forward, looked at Hong Wuliang and asked, Teacher, I only want to ask you one thing. Hong Wuliang let out a long sigh. Looking up, he closed his eyes and said indifferently, Ask away. Wei Wuyan's voice was very calm. Even he himself found it strange that his voice could actually be so calm at this moment. Teacher Aaron Xiaozhan, were you killed by you? Wei Wuyan repeated the last few words several times before he finally completed his sentence. His face was pale, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. But his eyes stared fiercely at his teacher without blinking. Hong Wuliang chuckled and said indifferently, Brother Yi, my whereabouts have already been exposed because of the encirclement today. I originally thought that it was Lang Yilang, that bastard. So I didn't move and waited here for him to come in, so that I could have a battle to the death with him. He smiled indifferently. I didn't expect it to be the 3 of you who came in. There must be other people outside, right? His younger brother Wei Wuyan was waiting for him to answer. But he was trying to change the topic. Yi Amren nodded. That's right. In order to capture you, the Yi clan, Zhuge clan and Long clan have mobilized a total of 3 supreme martial artists. The 3 of us are here, but there are 3 more outside. Hong Wuliang chuckled. Looks like I won't be able to escape this calamity today, Yi Amren said indifferently. Now you indeed have nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. Hong Wuliang murmured in an extremely low voice. He raised his head and thought silently for a while. Then he didn't speak anymore. Wei Wuyan's body trembled even more violently. He roared, Teacher, I'm asking you a question. This sentence had already sounded like a roar. His voice had already lost its usual reverence and admiration. Hong Wuliang looked up at the sky and said softly, I already have nowhere to go. Only death awaits me. There's no harm in telling you the truth. As he spoke, he looked at Wei Wuyan. His voice was actually very calm as he said softly, Since you've already guessed it, what else do you want me to say? Guessed it. Guessed it. Wei Wuyan murmured. His eyes were empty. Suddenly he laughed wildly. He laughed so hard that his whole body trembled. He laughed so hard that he used his hand to support himself against the wall again. He laughed so hard that big drops of tears gushed out from his eyes continuously. His laughter continued and reverberated. However, the 4 supreme martial artists present all felt an extreme misery. This laughter was indeed 100 times more miserable than crying. Wei Wuyan laughed and asked, Just for purple crystals? Just for the purple crystals that you have to not only maintain your injuries, but also improve? You want to rely on me to earn them? You think I'm earning them too slowly? Is that right? Is that right? Hong Wuliang said lightly. You shouldn't have slowed down the speed of earning purple crystals after you got married. He looked at his younger brother with some pity and said, Actually back then, I was also in a very difficult position. Wuyan, you're my only younger brother. I placed all my hopes on you. My heart ached for you. I thought very highly of you. You were in a very difficult position. You placed all your hopes on me. You were heartless to me. You thought very highly of me. Wei Wuyan laughed wildly. You killed my beloved wife, just because you felt heartache for me? You killed my only child just because you thought very highly of me. Wei Wuyan's eyes widened. Teacher, is this something you should say? Damn it, is this something a human should say? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.